starting with structures like stone circles, passage chambers, and these landscape features like White Horse Hills. They were building these infrastructure projects to help rebuild civilization and reignite the agricultural fertilization of the entire Earth. Anytime you hear mythology of ancient magic, think instead of magic that these guys had chemistry. A magnetic signature at the center of the structure that is, quote, interpreted as indicative of past lightning strikes. Literal proof of this hypothesis that lightning was striking ancient stone circles. Stonehenge and Avebury are lunar and tidal tracking mechanisms. The moon and the tides also have a direct effect on lightning. Newgrange is a predecessor in a passage chamber reactor system, with the Egyptian pyramids being the apex execution of this same type of encapsulated reactor chamber technology. Lightning is the power source of the Egyptian pyramids. It's a twofold system that involves telluric currents from below and lightning from above, as above, so below. The Giza Plateau itself is a cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator that created thunderstorm and lightning clouds. The entire system is an interconnected electrical network, the exact same thing that we have on the Giza Plateau, that was powered and activated by lightning. It's basically an encyclopedia in stone that is intended for future civilizations to come along, to read, to measure, to study the structures.
You are the #1 name that has been popping up in the comments since I started this podcast.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Geoffrey Drumm from the Land of Chem. You at least 2-3 times per episode. I'm getting. Hey, have you heard of this guy Geoffrey Drumm? You should really consider having him on the channel.
Yeah.
I've heard that for 2 years. So. Welcome, Jeffrey. It's
Thank you so much. Are we live? Are we live?
Yeah, we're
all
live.
All right, good deal. Yeah. Let's go. And shout out to all my loyal fans that have been plugging me on the show. I have like an extremely close-knit group of followers that support my channel. So shout out to all of you. You know who you are.
Yep.
We're finally here in the U.S., all the way from Egypt to come do this.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I appreciate you doing it, man. I mean, our goal here is to make the absolute the best documentary of your entire body of work that exists anywhere on the internet.
I appreciate that. Yeah. It's a mountain, man. We got a long way to climb in today's podcast. Yeah,
no doubt.
It's gonna be fun.
I got the day blocked off though. I got
Fantastic.
The day, so we're good. Yeah, whatever time it takes, we're gonna create the best documentary of your entire body of work. That's the goal today.
Cool.
So
very excited.
Very excited about it as well. So you want to maybe just start off introduction of yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. So, my name is Geoffrey Drumm. I'm the author of a book called The Land of Chem. The first book in the series is entitled An Initiation into Ancient Chemistry Through the Degrees of the Egyptian Pyramid. Perfect segue, by the way. And I promise this will be the last time that I mention my book during the duration of the podcast. So I'm not going to be in my book the whole time. I brought you a present.
Okay.
So I know you like purple. And purple is also my favorite color.
Beautiful.
And I originally, when I first published the book, I only printed 500 of those purple metallic foil and purple orchid paper print.
Wow.
And that's a signed copy. That's one of the 20 of those that are left in existence.
Wow.
So that purple paper is no longer available. So when I printed the second run of these things, I now have it in Egyptian blue, where the metal foil is blue and the inside paper is blue. Also beautiful, but I wanted to bring you one of those.
That's amazing. Thank you. Yep. Beautiful scarab.
Yeah, legitimate Egyptian scarab. And we found that in an antiques store where I live in Egypt. So for the people who don't know who I am, I've been living in Egypt for 3 years, pursuing my dream of this function of the Egyptian pyramids research, which has also started to incorporate ancient Neolithic structures from around Europe. And my wife and I also recently branched out into structures in Japan, which is also going to come up in today's podcast. But I've been living in Egypt for 3 years. That's a very unique one. I've never seen one with that sort of aesthetic in terms of the depiction of the scarab itself. But that is a token of good luck and success for your upcoming investigation of the Great Pyramid southern shafts and the Big Void, which we'll talk about, and I'd like to make some predictions for what you might find inside of those things probably when we get to the end of the show today.
Love it. Love it. Can't
Yeah.
wait to do it.
It's
Well, thank
awesome.
you. That's very, very kind of you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Yeah,
This,
of course.
This will go in the studio. I've got some other gifts from some other guests, and
Cool.
I've got a table here that this will go proudly on. This is freaking cool. by the
Awesome.
way.
Thank you.
And
Thank
you've
you.
got great taste in color.
I
as well.
appreciate it. Yeah. I feel right at home here.
Yep.
Yeah, the Purple
Awesome.
Lounge.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
It feels like Prince should be here with us.
Yeah, no doubt. No
Yeah,
doubt, no doubt.
yeah.
Well, cool. So I feels like maybe a good place to kind of kick off the conversation is what is like your kind of vision or understanding or best theory or best guess of who the people were that were building these structures. Like,
Okay.
what is the civilization? What time period are we in? Who are the people?
Perfect. So, in terms of the who, I don't like to necessarily get into the who because that's a subject of great debate and speculation. Because these structures were being built all around the world at the same time period by the various civilizations and inhabitants of the different countries and continents in which they were built. So I think that they were all being built by the indigenous population of the continents in which we find these structures. So there's not necessarily a conversation of a distinct who, because it was being built by everyone on the planet around the same time. That time period, mainly for me, focuses on the time period following the cataclysm at the end of the last ice age. So around 12,000 BC, there was, the Younger Dryas incident, right? Huge cataclysm, massive environmental changes around the planet. And I believe that this civilization during the Neolithic period, starting with structures like stone circles, passage chambers, and these landscape features like White Horse Hills, which are cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator systems, lightning storm generators. They were building these infrastructure projects to help rebuild civilization and reignite the agricultural fertilization of the entire earth. So these are infrastructure projects that were designed for beneficial applications that would be hugely important to the civilization at large, to all of the indigenous populations all around the world that were building these things. So that's sort of the time period starting around 10,000. So during the conversation, we're probably going to talk about the conventional timeline in terms of, for example, Newgrange. The conventional timeline for Newgrange is that it predates the construction of the Egyptian pyramids. I agree with that in that Newgrange is a predecessor in a passage chamber reactor system, with the Egyptian pyramids being the apex execution of this same type of encapsulated reactor chamber technology. So we'll also talk about an alternative timeline that pushes that back a little bit to being closer to the end of the last ice age, specifically regarding the Japanese Jomon civilization, which is a perfect example. So the Jomons are the indigenous population of Japan. And the earliest artifacts for the Japanese Jomon civilization date back to approximately 30,000 BCE. So around 30,000 BC. So the Jomon civilization existed during the last ice age. The latest date for the Japanese Jomon is around 300 BCE. So this is a civilization that existed through the end of the ice age. And the conventional date for their stone circles coincides with the date for the stone circles around the UK and Ireland, which is around 3500 BC. They started building these things. I think the implementation date for that technology is a little bit closer to the end of the last ice age, probably around 10,000 BC. And then we go into Egypt with, according to my research, the optimal timeline for the construction and operation of the Egyptian pyramids is during a time period known as the Saharan humid period, about 8500 BC until around 5300 BC, where there were monsoon rains sweeping across the upper eastern Sahara. There was abundant rainfall, And essentially, the Saharan desert was being transformed from a desert into a vast area of arable farmland, which also correlates directly to my hypothesis on the function of the pyramids in Dashur, which was for producing fertilizers. So, in conjunction with this new rainfall that was sweeping across the Sahara, they were utilizing some of the pyramids to create fertilizers that were used for agricultural applications and helping with this terraforming of the Upper Eastern Sahara during that time period. Then, around 5300 BC, the rains suddenly stopped, and the desert began to transform back into a desert. And then we see the civilization moving from the Upper Eastern Sahara back into the area around the Nile River, which is the beginning of the dynastic Egyptian civilization a couple thousand years later, 3500 BC.
Yeah, fascinating. And totally, yeah, hear you. And I was talking to Michael Button a couple of episodes ago. And we had this amazing talk about this same time period in the Sahara. And we were talking, and it was... And the other thing that happened about 3500 BC, at the same time that the Sahara was turning back into a desert, is my understanding, is the male population of Africa, Asia, and Europe dropped by 90%.
Yeah, went through a huge bottleneck period. Yes.
Right. Just the male population at the exact same time that this climate change was happening within the Sahara Desert. So what I said to Michael was, well, maybe it was the same thing that happened with Genghis Khan as he was leaving Mongolia and attacking China, and was just like created this incredible war and all of this just, devastation and murder and destruction and just killing of the civilian population. Well, maybe when the Sahara changed to desert and all of that entire civilization was kind of, like you said, forced out to the Nile, but maybe it was also being forced into Asia and the rest of Africa and Europe, and maybe there was a war happening there, and maybe that's what it can account for the massive decrease in the male population.
Sure, yeah.
That was happening at the same time. Maybe this civilization that built the pyramids, that built the Sphinx, that built all of these, that potentially built where the Richat structure is across northern Africa. Maybe this was maybe it was just a massive population, and they had to go into these other areas of the world nearby, whether it's Asia, Europe, or Africa, and just, kill or be killed, basically. And that accounts for the massive decrease in the male population. That accounts for some of the building that we see during that period of time. Maybe that's when the pyramids were kind of, are you tracking with this? Because this for me was like a big kind of like, aha moment where, get the Younger Dryas totally happened, total catastrophe. There was probably a civilization there at some point in time, but I hadn't really connected and put together, maybe that continued and lived on in the Sahara, just as people have lived in the Amazon for thousands and thousands of years. And maybe that's what accounts for this decrease in the male population. Maybe that's what accounts for some of this construction. Maybe that's what accounts for some of the vases. Maybe even Göbekli Tepe is... close enough to the same area that potentially maybe this was like some global, technological civilization that was really good at cutting big rocks.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So that kind of leads into an interesting conversation about the Neolithic period in general. So, for example, there are stone circles all over the UK, and there's also identical stone circle systems in Japan, which, according to conventional archaeology, these are built by two completely separate civilizations that did not have intercontinental sea or ocean travel at the time. But that can't be correct.
Right?
Because if you have Stone Circle A over here in the UK and Stone Circle B over here in Japan, there's also stone circles in South America. They're all over the planet, being built by this Neolithic civilization sometime between 10,000 BC and, let's say, 1,000 BC, all using the same sort of megalithic stone technology. So there's one of two things that could have happened. There has to be a point of origin, where they all have a common point of origin, and there was a diaspora of this civilization taking this knowledge and technology into different areas around the world. So, central point of origin. Or there is intercontinental travel, where these completely separate civilizations were traveling intercontinentally, sharing knowledge, technology, construction, etc., and they were utilizing these same megalithic stone technologies for the same applications around the planet. Again, revitalizing civilization and helping to stabilize the human civilization after this massive catastrophe, because human beings were in dire straits. So they started to implement this knowledge that had been accumulated over the Ice Age into these technological structures, again, for a variety of applications, primarily in regard to stone circle systems, is bringing atmospheric nitrate fertilizers to specific areas using lightning strikes.
All right. So what is that a good next kind of place to go into then
Yeah,
for now? I mean, I wanted to establish like, okay, so this is maybe the who and the when, and then okay, now what was happening? You know, like what were they doing? What were they building? Why were
yeah,
they building it? What were all these sites for? And
yep,
so I mean, your work kind of covers site by site by site, which is different than Chris Dunn, who I
yeah,
love, good friend, great guy,
yeah.
and he's got one theory, and it's very, I don't know how you would even, but
Well,
it's
he
one
refers to
building
himself as a Great Pyramid isolationist.
isolationist. There you go.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
yeah, yeah.
only focuses exclusively on the Great Pyramid.
Right.
And the vast majority, 99% of alternative hypotheses regarding the function of ancient structures is only on the Great Pyramid, as if all of the other pyramids in Egypt are completely non functional, or the Great Pyramid is the only one that's an ancient technological structure. All the rest of them are built by the dynastic civilization. It only focuses on the Great Pyramid, which I have a lot of respect for Christopher Dunn. He is the godfather of pyramid technology research. And it takes a lot of courage to, risk your reputation to talk about the function of the pyramids in general. And he was the first one that really came up with a methodological, step-by-step mechanisms of operation that drive the system. Now, I'm sure in the context of the conversation, I'm going to talk about why I disagree with almost everything that he says, but I have a ton of respect for Christopher Dunn. So, Chris, if you're watching this, please don't take this as any criticism, but I think it's an important conversation and engagement to be had talking about the various theories. And I've said this about my work too. So I've proposed a huge body of work that talks about all of the structures across the planet under the same umbrella of physics and chemistry based mechanisms of operation. So, in regard to the Great Pyramid, let's say the Great Pyramid uses XYZ mechanisms of operation that drive the system. If those mechanisms of operation don't apply to all of the rest of the pyramids or all of the ancient structures around the planet, I think it's missing part of the big picture, because all of these structures are connected. And my research has led me to discover that it's the same power source, it's the same conductivity enhancers, it's the same construction materials, and it's the same eventual output, which my overall theory is that the Egyptian pyramids are designed to produce chemicals on an industrial scale. So the output, the product, is not power, it's not electricity. They were harnessing nature's electricity as a power source, and the output and product are chemicals. Even when it comes to stone circles, so there's a chemical reaction that happens in the atmosphere when lightning strikes. And the general premise for the function of stone circles is to bring lightning strikes to specific areas, not to harness the voltage or the electricity, but rather to bring these lightning strikes, the rain and the atmospheric fertilizers, to farmlands and areas where this Neolithic civilization were doing either hunter-gatherer activities or proto-agriculture. It was, again, to revitalize the land, to circulate electricity and electric current back into the ground, to bring atmospheric nitrates and rain to the areas where they desperately needed more food. So it's one of the best criticisms and supports of my work, which we'll talk about Andy Hall at some point in the presentation. Andy Hall is a prolific researcher from the Thunderbolts project and the electric universe theory. He wrote a huge article about my work and did a big video on it, and basically said it's the most mundane and practical hypothesis for the function of ancient structures around the world, which I take that as a huge compliment. It's boring. Making chemicals and making fertilizers isn't very sexy, right? And we were talking last night how there's these two polar opposites.
Sexier than dying in, though, right?
Right.
The only other theory.
So that's kind of what I was about to say. Is there's two polar opposites to where it's it's either tombs and temples, or it's aliens, laser beams, and power generation.
Right.
And I don't believe in either one of those things. I'm like kind of in the middle ground where it's.
You don't believe in laser beams?
Oh, we modern laser beams.
Okay.
Sharks with friggin' laser beams on their heads. No, but so it's kind of in the middle ground where it's very practical, civil engineering, infrastructure projects that we're producing we'll get into methane, right? Methane for domestic applications. You can use methane for heating. You can use it for lighting. You can use it as a fuel source. You can use it for high temperature metallurgy. All these sorts of applications are, kind of rudimentary. And again, mundane is a great word for it. But I think it's the most practical explanation for the investment in building these structures. It has to be worth the ROI, right? The return on the investment. If you're going to build these things, it has to be something that's incredibly valuable. And a vast array of different chemicals. Chemicals are by far the most important thing that we produce as a modern society. During the early industrial revolution, right, when we started manufacturing chemicals on an industrial scale, that was literally the biggest transformation human society has experienced in the modern time, was because we started manufacturing fertilizers via the Haber process on an industrial scale. It was a huge development in the early 1900s. And I'll get into it in just a minute why I think that Fritz Haber may have discovered and reversed engineered the same technology from the Red Pyramid that I've revealed in my research regarding the function of the structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Yeah. I mean, maybe we kind of start with one of them. So there's all of these structures all around the world, and so they're used to design and manufacture chemicals, which you're saying is a mundane explanation for what these things are. It's also
for most people. I think it's exciting, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's also the kind of one of the only new and interesting theories that's come along in decades and decades, really, since Chris Dunn.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So, well, no, it's true. And so, I mean, maybe if we start on one thing that is kind of one of the more compelling, bigger, more convincing areas, locations, sites that you have a really strong, solid explanation for.
Yeah.
And then maybe that, not to narrow it too fine of a point on it, but maybe that you haven't talked about in great detail. And maybe we kind of just kick it off from there and start explaining what were these people actually doing.
Yeah. So I think it's important in understanding my body of research to establish the evolution of the technology.
Okay.
How did we get to the Egyptian pyramids? Because that's a question. Like, why is there no evidence of a preceding technology? Which I think there absolutely is. And it started, again, Ryan, if you would, go ahead and load up the presentation and we can get into that. And I'll talk about the first artifact that I found in Egypt that really changed my mind regarding the function of the pyramids. And then I'd also like to establish sort of a precedent for the utilization and optimization of Earth's natural resources as being the driver of this ancient technology. It is Earth-based technology that utilized the natural Earth electric currents from telluric currents and lightning as a power source of these systems. Earth has abundant electricity. And if you understand how to harness Earth's natural electricity, you don't need to produce power. You can use the power that Earth already has in abundant supply. Earth also has a vast array of minerals and construction materials that are directly applicable to the function of each structure. Because all of these structures around the planet are built with very, very specific construction materials, all of which have different applications regarding the function of the particular structure. And then we also have things like subterranean natural resources, like methane gas and hydrogen sulfide, which are the initial reactants or source of raw materials for extraction. We'll get to that when we talk about the step pyramid and the source of hydrogen sulfide gas in the cave and tunnel system below the Giza Plateau. What's actually below the Giza Plateau is the source of hydrogen sulfide gas that was utilized within the Great Pyramid for the production of sulfuric acid. So this first one here. Okay. Have you ever seen this before?
Yeah, I have actually.
Yeah. So this
is a very compelling part of what you bring.
Yeah. So my first trip to Egypt was in 2017, and this is a site called Abu Sir, which is a necropolis, a pyramid complex that has three major pyramids: the pyramid of Neferkare, Niuserre, and Sahura. This is at the pyramid of Niuserre. And you'll see here in this picture, there's three different colors of stone. We have black basalt, we have white limestone, and the red is actually red quartzite. But the function of red quartzite and red granite is actually very similar in regard to the Egyptian pyramids. So black, white, and red. The mythology of Atlantis says that Atlantis was built with three different types of stone, three different colors of stone: black, white, and red. Directly corresponds to the construction materials utilized in the Egyptian pyramids: black basalt, limestone, and red granite. It's the three colors of our modern electrical wiring system: black, at least here in the US, black, white, and red. There is information and communication encoded in this symbolic color coding, each one indicative of the function of the specific type of material. So all of these different construction materials have specific properties due to their mineral composition. So stones, generally speaking, are not electrically conductive. They're insulators, specifically dielectrics, which have a capacity for storing electric fields. Limestone, specifically for storing electric fields. Black basalt has applications for heat storage, and we still use black basalt today as a thermal insulator. Like once it gets hot, it stays hot. And then red granite has quartz content, which, according to my research, people talk a lot about piezoelectricity. In my opinion, it's actually the exact opposite. It's a phenomenon known as the inverse piezoelectric effect: electric current-induced electric fields that create ultrasound vibrations. So when you see the three colors of the stone there, anytime you see white, think electric field storage. Anytime you see black, think heat storage. And anytime you see red, think ultrasound. And I'll get into the function of this system, explaining how each different type of stone is applicable for this configuration. So I went to Egypt, and I was familiar with Christopher Dunn's work, and pyramids are power plants. But the first time I saw this, it was the number one artifact that began to change my mind regarding the function of these systems, because they were collecting something. And the inlet, and I'll show this later in the presentation, the inlet to this conduit is right at the base of the pyramid. And it's a very tiny inlet. So the conventional explanation for this is water drainage.
That's not the inlet right there?
No, that's the outlet.
It's the outlet.
Yeah, the outlet that pours into the collection bowl.
And that's also at the base of the same pyramid?
Yeah. So the inlet, so what we're looking at here is the eastern end of the pyramid's eastern temple. And then if you go back up to the right, you go toward the pyramid itself. And you see in the distance, that is the step pyramid complex there in the distance.
Sure. Yep.
So the inlet to this thing, right at the base of the pyramid, Conventional explanation is water drainage. We've actually had a very unique experience where we were in Abu Sir and it started to pour rain for like 5 minutes. And that was it. It only lasted for 5 minutes, which is very typical for rainstorms in Egypt nowadays. Again, the climate was very, very different during the Saharan humid period where there was plenty of rainfall. So pouring rain. None of the rain is going in that little conduit. And the conduit is directly connected into the end of the pyramid. So what was flowing through that thing and being collected in that bowl? It doesn't add up that it's rainwater. That's like building a drainage channel on the end of a headstone in a cemetery, right? Why would you make a water drainage pipe on a headstone or a cemetery thing to collect this little tiny bit of water? The Nile River is right there. If you wanted to collect water, you just go to the Nile River and you can purify the water.
So the best explanation that we have for what that is today is rainwater collection?
Correct. That's the conventional story that was proposed by Borchardt, the archaeologist that excavated that thing first.
Okay. And this exists in one spot on this pyramid or multiple spots on this pyramid?
So originally there were actually 2 collection bowls that were connected into this channel system. And the channel actually runs underneath the black basalt paving. So again, black basalt is a material for heat storage. So the paving stones would have been hot. So what that does, again, to jump forward a little bit, is prevent coagulation in your pipe. Right? So you have a pipe running underneath a floor. There's absolutely no way to unclog that pipe if it were to get, a bunch of junk stuck in there.
Yeah.
So by keeping the system hot and keeping the fluid hot, you're preventing coagulation and clogging of your pipe. So that's the implementation of the black basalt here at the Pyramid of Niuserre, is to keep the solution hot. And if you have any dissolved solids, for example, if you have salt water and you have too much salt dissolved in the water, a good way to do that is to keep it hot, to keep that salt dissolved in the water to prevent it from crashing out and all of the solids that are dissolved in the aqueous solution from settling in the pipe.
So the basalt is exposed to the sun at some point in this journey?
Yeah, and also, again, everything is directly connected to lightning.
Yeah.
And electric fields that are induced in the stone from lightning strikes. Lightning is the power source of the Egyptian pyramids. It's a twofold system that involves telluric currents from below and lightning from above. As above, so below. And Earth has power sources from below and above.
Okay. So is the basalt itself actually being heated by the sun, or just below in the ground and above with lightning potentially?
It could be both. Certainly black basalt gets absolutely roasting hot. Anybody who's been on the Giza Plateau and has walked on the black basalt floor of the Great Pyramids, Eastern Temple, it gets roasting hot. So it certainly could have just been heated by the sun. But I think the primary heating of the elements is from electric current induced electric fields within the stone from lightning strikes. And once basalt gets hot, I have a ton of research that supports the conclusion that black basalt is the heating element that was integrated into the function of these structures.
You think they had like a lightning rod or something that was
100%?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Obelisks.
Okay.
Obelisks are lightning rods.
Okay.
So our standing stones and menhir, right? These big obelisk pillars at the center of stone circles are the earlier implementation of lightning rod technology that was taken to its apex execution in Egypt. So the Neolithic stone circle stuff is the dawn of the technology.
And at what time period was there enough lightning striking around in this geographical region that this would have been
Saharan humid period?
Sahara-humid
period. Yeah. There were abundant thunderstorms during the Saharan humid period.
Okay.
This also goes into a critical part of my research, which are the White Horse Hill lightning storm generators.
Okay.
You recently went to Avebury. Are you familiar with the White Horse Hills of Wiltshire?
Maybe.
Oh, dude, we're going to get it.
Yeah.
We'll go so hard on this topic.
All right.
And the Giza Plateau itself is a cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator that created thunderstorm clouds, thunderstorm and lightning clouds. They have landscape terrain engineering that was designed to produce thunderstorms. And the white horse is an ancient symbol that represents cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds. And there's hills all over Wiltshire, England that are inscribed with this white horse. And I'll show you mathematical connection that connects the Avebury landscape serpent temple complex system directly mathematically connects to the measurements at the Luxor Temple and the White Horse Hill in Luxor.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Take it away.
Yeah. So we'll go just kind of jump through this real quick.
Good.
Okay. So raw materials, right? Earth has an abundant supply of raw materials. And we do this today in modern manufacturing where sulfur, for example, I'll show on the Giza Plateau that there's a source of hydrogen sulfide directly below the Giza Plateau that is the source of the raw material that drives the chemical reaction process within the Great Pyramid. Obviously, we have air, water, natural gas. All of these natural resources are abundant in Egypt. The methane and natural gas mining operations are still a huge industry in Egypt. And each one of the Egyptian pyramids and the corresponding structures were utilizing these raw materials as sources of the reactants for the manufacturing process. So, for example, the Step Pyramid is basically a fracking machine that was designed to extract bedrock deposits of methane gas. We have the Serapeum or the Serapeum. Americans say Serapeum, Egyptians say Serapeum. I've been living in Egypt long enough where I've picked up the pronunciation of saying Serapeum. So if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, the Serapeum was used to convert water into hydrogen and oxygen. Then the Great Pyramid uses sulfur oxides and air to produce sulfuric acid. The Red Pyramid takes hydrogen and nitrogen and transforms it into ammonia for fertilizers. Then you could take those two products, the sulfuric acid and ammonia, and make ammonium sulfate, which is another fertilizer compound. So chemical manufacturing. And again, the earth providing all of the natural resources that are required for this operation. You don't need to produce power. You don't need to do anything. And this technology around the world is, again, it's earth-based technology that was accumulated by this Neolithic civilization by studying the forces of nature, understanding the cycles of nature. And the ancient technology works in conjunction with all of these earth forces. So this is another thing about the function of the Egyptian pyramids. Everything is cyclical. Everything goes in a cycle. Conventional archaeologists will talk about their ritual structures, right? When they don't know what something is, it's for an ancient ritual.
Ceremonial.
Yeah. I actually agree with that nomenclature for a ritual because it's something that is done as a spiritual process, and it doesn't happen right away, and it's not something that necessarily happens 24/7. A ritual is an ongoing cyclical process. So these were absolutely ritual sites, for example, stone circles, druidic rituals for bringing lightning, thunderstorm, rain, and fertilizers, controlling the weather, which is one of the magical powers that was possessed by the Tuatha De Danann, the mythological civilization, the original gods of ancient Ireland. They were said to have magic and the ability to control the weather, which is absolutely applicable to the technology. And one of the premises of my work is that stories and mythology of ancient magic are actually referring to chemistry. So if you're an onlooker and you don't know what chemistry is, and I have two clear solutions, and I pour solution A into solution B and it turns red. Oh, it's a sorcerer. It's a magician. It's a chemical reaction. So these stories of ancient magic are from people who are not initiated into the science of chemistry. So ancient magic, anytime you hear mythology of ancient magic, think instead of magic that these guys had chemistry. So imagine an advanced civilization that had knowledge of chemistry, making chemical reactions. And, again, I pour one solution into another solution, and all of a sudden a solid forms. It's a reaction called precipitation, right? To an onlooker, you're creating something out of nothing. You're summoning with your sorcery powers this mythical whatever, It's chemistry. So anytime you hear that in mythology, think chemistry instead of magic. So the Tuatha had not only ancient magic, but they also had the ability to control the weather. And we'll get to that about the White Horse Hills.
So controlling the weather, so obelisks being used to capture lightning as a power source. So you had a power source from underground and you had a power source from the sky.
Correct.
And so they were so you're saying that all of the ancient structures, all of the stone structures that we see that have standing rocks or obelisks or whatever were being used in the same way, that that lightning was coming down and creating it was striking the stone, it was creating some sort of a reaction, and they were using that power to develop and manufacture chemicals.
Well, so let me clarify there.
Please.
In regard to stone circles, they weren't harnessing the power per se. Somewhat when we get to the sanctuary of Avebury, the head end of the Serpent Temple complex, voltage from that strike was being allocated into the sanctuary. But the primary impetus for bringing a lightning strike to a location is simply to get it to strike where you want it to. Not necessarily for harnessing the voltage, but for capturing the power of the atmospheric chemical reaction that happens when lightning strikes. So in the atmosphere, when lightning strikes, the massive voltage and heat creates a reaction in the atmosphere that produces atmospheric nitrates, fertilizers in the air. Happens naturally anywhere lightning strikes. And farmers love lightning strikes and thunderstorms because they know the rain that is brought with the lightning storm is going to carry down these water-soluble atmospheric nitrates to the crops. So they built these stone circles. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of these things all over Europe and the UK. They built them everywhere where they were doing hunter-gatherer activities or proto-agricultural farming, just to fertilize the land, to bring lightning, to bring rain, and to bring these atmospheric nitrate fertilizers. And there's also a direct connection in the mythology across the planet of the gods of these ancient civilizations that are directly connected to lightning and agriculture. These two things go hand in hand in the symbolism and mythology of ancient civilizations. Even with Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of Mesoamerica, directly connected to lightning and agriculture.
Does this theory exist anywhere else? This lightning capture, the use of the nitrates for crops, and does this have you heard this anywhere else? This
No.
is just okay.
So, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I'm the first to talk about this in terms of the function of stone circles. I think in a previous episode, I forget the guy's name, you were talking about John Burke and Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, and how they measured the electric fields in stone circles. And he says that these things were made for seed generation and seed modification. And that lightning, Burke talks about this, that lightning strikes on the system were an unintended consequence of this electric field accumulation within stone circles. I love John Burke's work, and he was a prolific researcher, but I actually think that lightning was the intended consequence, that that's what they wanted to happen. By accumulating electric fields from telluric currents within the stone circle, you are giving lightning a target to strike. Cloud-to-ground lightning is negatively charged, and Burke found that there were positive charges that were building up inside of these stone circle systems. So what you're doing is creating a target on the surface of the Earth by utilizing telluric currents to charge the system with a positive electric field that is a target for negatively charged cloud-to-ground lightning. That is why there's electric field charge within systems like Avebury, because it's utilizing telluric current flow to assimilate and accumulate that electric field within the stone circle as a target for lightning strikes.
Yeah, fascinating theory. So So, and then what were they building? Like, what were they, so what was this civilization from a chemical standpoint? What were they manufacturing in some of these spots?
Yeah. So in regard to the Egyptian pyramids, let's start with proto-pyramids.
Okay.
So I call them passage chamber reactors, like Newgrange, West Kennet Long Barrow, the Ishibutai tumulus in Japan. All of these structures around the world have very similar configurations, and they were for manufacturing a product known as ferrous sulfate. And I'll get into it here in just a minute regarding the curb stone of Newgrange. There's a stone in front of Newgrange that is inscribed with a bunch of symbols. And these symbols are literally a chemical reaction formula. It's a rudimentary inscription. It's like an instruction manual for exactly how Newgrange operates. And they left it right out in front of the structure so that one day in the long, long future, after their civilization was gone, people could go and read that stone and be able to reverse engineer how the structure worked. And I'll show you exactly how I've interpreted the symbols of the Newgrange curbstone as directly applicable to the chemical reaction process that was happening inside of the structure. There's also communication encoded in the Egyptian pyramids. All of these structures have it's basically an encyclopedia in stone, where they are encoded with a vast amount of knowledge that is intended for future civilizations to come along, to read, to measure, to study the structures, and let the structure speak to you and allow these communication symbols that are embedded within the structure, physical parts of the structure, that literally tell you how it's operating. For example, when we get to the Red Pyramid, the tiered upper vault of the Red Pyramid, what happens in the tiered upper vault? The volume of the chamber gets lower. By manipulating volume in a chemical reaction, you can increase temperature and pressure. So the engineering of that chamber is telling you exactly what it was designed to do. The 33 feet external reservoir, the height of this external reservoir, 33 feet. 33 feet of water is equal to 1 atmosphere of pressure. The height of the reservoir is communicating in a mathematical formula that the structure was designed to utilize the water to increase pressure. There's communication and mathematics encoded in all of these structures around the world that connect them and show you that they are integrated into a system and they all have a specific function.
So the Great Pyramid has the royal cubit embedded into its dimensions and its manufacturing.
Yes.
So within the King's Chamber, it's like 10 by 20 royal cubits.
Yep.
And a lot of the vases actually have subunits of the royal cubit called the royal finger. It's 1/28th of a cubit.
Yeah.
So do we see that measurement anywhere else? Like, what are the other pyramids that we see cubits? Is it like, it's not global, right? I mean, it's not like we're not seeing it on the walls in South America. We're not,
right.
So like, what's the extent of the metrology?
Yeah. So the metrology and the physical measurements aren't necessarily my area of expertise. And I honestly don't know the answer to that. Hugh Newman, again, these people that specifically focus on the conversion of the cubit into something called the megalithic yard. There's direct mathematical conversions that correlate these systems of measurement. Not my area of expertise. Really, the main thing I focus on is the function, the mechanisms of operation and the product of the structures themselves. So the measurements, all of that is a completely separate discussion. And there is so much knowledge to be extrapolated from the measurements, but that's just not my area of expertise.
But in general, when you look around the world and you see megalithic stone structures, you're saying that it's coming from the same group of people, basically. I mean, maybe they're a couple of thousand years apart, but
right.
but the technology for what they're building in South America, maybe it's local to that group of people, but somehow connected to a larger group of people that was also doing megalithic stonework in Egypt and in Japan and all over the world. I want to make sure that I'm accurately thinking about and representing your theory.
So again, that gets back to a complicated discussion. Is it a single point of origin? So basically Atlantis, right? The origin of the technology. I'm not a huge Atlantis person. Again, not my area of expertise. But again, the colors of the stone utilized in Atlantis, the black, white, and red, directly applies to the Egyptian pyramids, and it also applies to other structures around the world that are also using sandstones and red granite, black basalt, etc. So there's one of two possibilities. The single point of origin, where everything starts in Atlantis, and then during the destruction of Atlantis, there's a diaspora of this civilization that went everywhere in the world and brought this technology to different continents. That's possibility number one. Possibility number two is there's intercontinental travel during this time period after the end of the last ice age, the Neolithic period, where these civilizations were traveling around and they were sharing knowledge and technology and systems of construction where they were all sharing this stuff. Say, hey, your civilization needs it over here. Let me share some of my knowledge on how to build these things. Some of them built them differently with the independent styles of that civilization. Again, the difference between Mesoamerican pyramids and Egyptian pyramids. Same knowledge base, but with different aesthetic per that civilization.
Okay, yeah, let's walk through maybe an example of like one structure or one, monument or whatever it is, and all the evidence that kind of, leads to your conclusion about what they were doing there.
Right.
Yeah.
So first I want to establish proof.
Okay.
I don't ever like to say proof, but very, very compelling evidence for lightning strikes at ancient locations.
Good.
People be like, oh, this is nonsense. You can't control the weather. You can't control where lightning strikes. You absolutely can.
Oh, yeah, you can.
And we have direct physical evidence and research-based support for the idea that stone circles were being struck by lightning and lightning strikes on the Great Pyramid. Okay, so this is structure known as the Trial Passages on the east side of the Great Pyramid. And I work in conjunction with a research team called the Asida Project. I'm an official team member of the Asida Project. And the Asida Project I won't call this guy out, but one of my good friends in Egypt, I just don't want to single him out for purposes of the podcast. We all know who he is. Best guide in Egypt. My personal guide during my 2017, 2020, and 21 research trips to Egypt. They collected a bunch of samples in 2010, between 2010 and 2015, hundreds of samples, 12 kilograms worth of samples across a variety of ancient sites in Egypt, including from the iron veins of the Giza Plateau. We found fulgurites on the Giza Plateau. Fulgurites are fossilized lightning. So there are fulgurites on the Giza Plateau. This is one of the sample locations. This is a chunk of iron oxide. And there's huge iron veins that run all over and underneath the Giza Plateau. Huge deposits of iron. And they are the wiring network that connect all of the structures across the Giza Plateau.
How did it get there?
Hydrothermal deposits.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Giza Plateau itself is an ancient sea floor. You heard about the shells on the Giza Plateau? All the bedrock limestone is filled with seashells. So we're talking hundreds of millions of years ago. It was the sea floor of an ocean called the Tethys Sea. So hundreds and hundreds of millions of years ago, the Giza Plateau limestone bedrock was being formed at the bottom of the Tethys Sea. And these iron veins are hydrothermal metal ore mineral deposits that were formed from hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the Tethys Sea. And the pyramids are built directly on top of these deposits. They knew exactly what they were, and the Giza Plateau, again, is the apex execution of this natural resource utilization and optimization technology. We have subterranean natural gas resources. We have metal ore mineral deposits. We have conductive aquifers below the pyramids. All of these things are directly related to the function and directly connected to lightning. So, for example, we took a sample from inside of the Osiris shaft of the water. That is not fresh water, it's brackish water, which means it's relatively high in salt and other mineral content, which makes it very, very good conductor of electricity. Pure water itself is not electrically conductive. Like distilled water is not an electrical conductor. But if you have minerals in there, electrolytes, any sort of salts or mineral deposits, that makes the water far more electrically conductive, which is super important. So
saltwater pools for Florida was a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good.
Direct target for lightning strikes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm glad
Which you see that all the time.
I'm glad we made the switch.
Yeah. So Florida would be a perfect place to rebuild one of these structures.
Yeah.
Because it has all of the natural resources that are required to make these things tick. So these are, we'll get into I have tons of chemical analysis data to support all of the statements that I've made in the preface to this conversation. So anybody who's like, oh no, this isn't, just wait until you see all the evidence. Silicate microspheres from these fulgurites. So these are fused silica microspheres that were discovered in the chemical analysis of the fulgurites from the Giza Plateau. Okay, so what's a fulgurite? For anybody that doesn't know, a fulgurite is literally fossilized lightning. And I'm going to quote a few things. Okay, so I'm a huge stickler for mechanisms of operation, step-by-step procedures that make these systems work. It drives me nuts that there's people in this industry of lost ancient high technology that just make wild claims and speculations about the function of these structures, and they provide absolutely zero supporting evidence or research.
That's the most fun kind.
I know.
Why does that
and
make
people
you
love
upset?
that.
Yeah,
people love it. But I've
fantastic.
dedicated my life. And, you know, when I moved to Egypt, I sold my house. I sold my car. I quit my very comfortable and lucrative career job to do this, to go live in the Middle East, to live in Egypt, to dedicate my life to this. And it's just infuriating that people come on podcasts and they're like, oh, X, Y, and Z, but there's absolutely no evidence to support those claims. So I'm not going to be that type of person where I make wild speculations without providing supporting evidence, nor am I going to come on a podcast and say X, Y, Z without showing you and bringing the receipts. So there might be a few things that I quote directly. So fossilized lightning, basically when lightning strikes the ground, it will fuse and vitrify all of the material that it hits and creates these deposits. Usually they're branch-like formations. They call them Lichtenberg figures, these branch-like patterns. So this happens when lightning hits a dielectric surface, not a conductor, a dielectric surface. And it fuses. The lightning will go in the path of least resistance through this dielectric material and creates these branching fulgurite Lichtenberg patterns. So we've discovered fulgurites on the Giza Plateau from lightning strikes. Direct evidence of this claim that lightning was powering these systems. Fulgurites, step number one. So we talk about as above, so below. Telluric currents from below and lightning from above. And the assimilation of telluric currents is what creates the dielectric polarization and the development of positive charges on the surface of these things. So what are telluric currents? Telluric currents are natural electric currents flowing on or beneath the surface of the Earth, generally flowing in a direction parallel to the Earth's surface. So it's natural electricity flowing through the surface of the Earth. And this is an important note about telluric currents. So these telluric currents can be found whenever a mineral has some remarkably different electrical conductivity compared with that of the surrounding materials. This gives rise to a localized conductivity anomaly. So telluric currents are more concentrated, and they flow in areas where there are these mineral deposits or conductivity anomalies that are created by Earth's natural resources like subterranean water and metal ore minerals. This is exactly what we have on the Giza Plateau, and this is exactly what we have below all of the stone circles across the planet. Subterranean water, mineral-rich springs or aquifers. Super important paper here. that connects telluric currents, lightning strike locations, and natural resources. The title of the paper is Telluric and Earth Currents, Lightning Strike Locations, and Natural Resource Exploration. So again, telluric currents are natural electric currents flowing in the crust of the Earth. Lightning strikes balance telluric and ionospheric capacitance by bridging the lower atmosphere dielectric with static bursts. Lightning is an electrostatic phenomenon. Same thing as you get like a shock from, a doorknob. Lightning is a massive example of an electrostatic discharge. Most lightning comes from cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds. We'll talk about the cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud generators. So for cloud to ground lightning, the conclusion of this paper is that the rock matrix and the conductivity or resistivity of the rock matrix appears to have more influence on where cloud-to-ground lightning strikes occur. So telluric currents in this paper are directly connected to lightning strike locations. And these telluric currents and the accumulation thereof is directly connected to subterranean natural resources. Again, Earth technology, utilizing natural resources that are abundant in the Earth to provide the power source for these systems, the charging from below. So they built these stone circles and the later Egyptian pyramids on areas that were concentrating the flow of electric currents into the structure. That's step number one of the power source. It's a twofold system. So the conclusion is that there are earth currents in the depth of natural resource exploration that have a controlling impact on cloud-to-ground lightning strike locations. And I'm quoting this paper directly so that I'm not making this claim. It's coming directly from a peer-reviewed academic paper.
What does that mean? Say that last sentence again.
Yeah.
It does what?
So telluric currents that are assimilated by these underground natural resources have a controlling impact on where cloud-to-ground lightning strikes. Areas of the Earth's crust that accumulate these telluric currents via subterranean natural resources are areas where lightning strikes more prevalently.
Okay.
So the paper, long story short, is directly connecting subterranean natural resources, which facilitate the uptake of telluric currents that create a charge on the surface of the Earth, which again is a target for negatively charged cloud-to-ground lightning strikes. All three of these things, subterranean natural resources, telluric currents, and lightning, are directly connected. And that is the impetus for the construction of stone circle technology and the driving force of these systems. So another important quote here. You have a question. Go ahead.
Well, for what purpose, though? I mean, so we're creating lightning strikes and we're creating energy, and you've got the energy underground, you've got the energy from above, and
Yep.
then you're releasing these ions or whatever, and that is acting as a fertilizer for some of the surrounding land, right?
Yeah.
So are they doing more with the energy, or is it simply, hey, I'm going to harness all of this energy so that I can maximize my crops in the surrounding land? Just that.
The most important thing you can do for your civilization is feed the people.
Yep.
Especially if we're talking about a civilization that just survived the most massive cataclysm that has been seen on the planet. We have to use technology to bring the Earth back to life and to restabilize our civilization, especially if they're moving into new areas. Again, this goes back to the single point of origin discussion. If our homeland is now underwater and we have to go to these new areas that may or may not be barren and completely frozen, we got to revitalize the farmland. The most important thing you can do in terms of ancient technology is feed the people. So they were bringing rain, they were bringing thunderstorms, and bringing this lightning, using the forces of nature to create fertilizer. It's again, this is why my work has been described as mundane, but people don't understand how important fertilizers are to our civilization today. early 1900s, the most important thing that ever happened in the Industrial Revolution was the development of the Haber process and the industrial scale manufacturing of fertilizer. The most important development of our civilization. Same was true of the ancient civilization. Now, they also used the voltage for other applications, which I'll get to in just a sec.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so they're creating lightning rods, essentially, right? And so, I mean, you've got people working out in these fields and plowing the fields, and so you're now making it safer for people, I guess, that are out there working as well, because you're isolating, you're restricting where the lightning is going to strike, I guess, too, right? Potentially.
Correct. They also had timing mechanisms to know exactly when and where this was going to happen. And I'll get into Stonehenge and Avebury are lunar and tidal tracking mechanisms. The moon and the tides also have a direct effect on lightning. And I'll show a research paper in just a minute that explains why both Stonehenge and Avebury track the stages of the moon and tides. Okay, so the next important thing that I want to quote here, again, I apologize to quote stuff directly, but it's super important for me to establish scientific basis, the foundation for this power source and its connection into this ancient technology. Because I'm not just going to say, again, XYZ, lightning strikes stone circles. There has to be a mechanism of operation, a step-by-step procedure that makes the system work. So the next important thing, geophysicists have known for decades that there are electrical currents in the earth, and these electrical currents are modified by natural resources, which can be resistive, either freshwater aquifers, oil, gas, salt, etc. So we have resistive, which is insulators that they're not conductors, they're resistive. Insulators. Or conductive, like brines, which is salt water, clays, or metals like copper, iron, lead, zinc, gold, silver, and rare earths. Okay, so again, these subterranean natural resources, whether they be resistive or conductive, have a direct effect on telluric current accumulation locations and the flow of these telluric currents through Earth. Okay, so metals like copper, iron, lead, zinc, gold, and silver. Well, first, water. This is the Hill of Tara in Ireland, and you can see all around here these wells. There are subterranean springs that run below this entire structure. These mineral springs, these natural springs, they aren't distilled water. It's filled with salts and minerals, which make it very, very conductive, which, as the paper just said, telluric currents occur more often, and they are accumulated at sites where these conductive subterranean natural resources exist. All of the stone circles, all of the ancient sites around the planet are built on natural springs with subterranean deposits, either springs or aquifers, whatever it may be. There's subterranean water that is electrically conductive below all of these structures, which facilitates the uptake of telluric currents into the structure itself. Phase one of the power system, the charging via telluric currents to develop electric fields within the structure.
Yep.
So next thing, water source of the Egyptian pyramids, the Nile River. And you see here a comparison with our modern industrial scale chemical reactors that are also built all along rivers. And I mentioned the subterranean water source below the Great Pyramid. Again, these brackish water, for example, the Osiris shaft, there's water below the Giza Plateau as well for this exact same reason. Facilitation of the uptake of telluric currents into the structure. Okay, so this is me standing on the east side of the Central Pyramid in one of the huge iron ore deposits. All that reddish brown material is a huge, huge vein of iron ore. Okay, so we just saw in that paper, it specifically referenced ore deposits like copper, iron, zinc, gold, silver, and rare earth metals. So this is the concentration of rare earth metals that was found in one of the boat pits, quote unquote boat pits near the Central Pyramid. These are all rare earth elements that were just referenced in that paper. And then we have all sorts of metals like iron, tin, nickel, lead. This one is platinum. This is a sample that has 35% platinum. Then we also find silver, gold, and electrum in these metal ore deposits on the Giza Plateau. So now here, I've established the premise of telluric current accumulation via these natural resources, subterranean water and metal ore mineral deposits, which is exactly what we have below all of these ancient structures, including the Egyptian pyramids. There's also a direct connection between these subterranean natural resources and lightning, because we're building up charge, which is the ideal target for negative cloud-to-ground lightning strikes. Okay, so the conclusion is that, again, electrical currents in the rock matrix, telluric currents, have much more of an impact on lightning strike locations than infrastructure. So what happens during a thunderstorm is that a natural thunderstorm, right? The Earth's surface normally has a negative charge. During a thunderstorm, the Earth will start to build up a positive charge on the surface of the ground, and a negative charge builds up in the cloud. And lightning is an electrostatic discharge that balances that negative and positive charge, because opposites attract. So it's an electrostatic discharge that balances the negative charge from lightning and the positive charge on the surface of the ground. That is exactly the reason and mechanism of operation that drives stone circle technology and eventually into the Egyptian pyramids. Another important point here. This conclusion is supported by the fact that there are up to 25% more lightning strikes at high lunar tide when compared to the number of lightning strikes at low lunar tide. So here we're establishing a connection between lightning strikes and the frequency of lightning strikes, the moon, and tides. This will be important when we get. So as the moon goes around the Earth, its gravity raises the ocean, but also raises the ground. These are called Earth tides. The Earth tides also have a significant impact on Earth currents. So Earth tides, you need to be calculated using both the position of the moon and the position of the sun. The conjunction of the moon and the sun are important for calculating tides. This is going to come up when we get to Avebury and Stonehenge, which are tracking mechanisms to predict exactly when these conjunctions are going to occur. Okay, another important thing. Lightning strikes excite telluric currents. So the Earth is an electrical circuit. Lightning strikes stimulate telluric currents. Telluric currents attract lightning strikes. So it's a circular, reciprocating electrical circuit. So another quote from a paper here. It is known, significant part of telluric currents is caused by excitation of the planet's magnetic field under solar activity and also lightning discharges. So normally on Earth, every second, about 400 to 4,000 lightning strikes occur, with about 2,000 natural thunderstorms at any minute on Earth. And telluric currents are stimulated by these lightning strikes. The Ouroboros, an ancient symbol for the perpetual recirculation of electric current. The snake also being directly connected to the symbolism of the Avebury Serpent Temple complex, the Japanese dragon, and Kukulkan Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of Mesoamerica, all connected to telluric currents and lightning. Okay, so again, here on the Giza Plateau, we have natural resources, metal ore mineral deposits. This is the entrance into the Dashur pyramid complex, the red and bent pyramid. Red pyramid is down here in the bottom left corner. What you see there at the entrance is a joint venture between Calda Petroleum and Apache Oil. It is a methane gas and crude oil processing facility.
That on the right.
Correct. Yeah, that big facility there. I'll get to a bigger picture. See the road coming there from the green area?
Yep.
That's the entrance into the Dashur Pyramid Complex.
Okay.
And right at the entrance of the red and bent pyramid complex is a methane gas and crude oil processing facility. It just so happens that there's a direct connection between ammonia and processing crude oil. So my hypothesis for the red pyramid is it's producing aqueous ammonia, which is ammonia gas dissolved in water. Currently today in the petroleum industry, they utilize aqueous ammonia for neutralizing acidic chemical constituents of crude oil, specifically for the production of bitumen, which is huge in the shipbuilding industry. I think Michael was also talking about ancient shipbuilding and this huge maritime industry. So another huge application for ammonia would have been for processing bitumen and crude oil to remove these acidic constituents. But we have this methane gas and crude oil processing facility right next to the red pyramid. Again, we're connecting subterranean natural resources, telluric currents, and lightning strike locations. Okay, so we're going to talk about Avebury, I believe, for a second. So this is a great image from if any of you old heads out there, you might know a movie called Children of the Stones, which is about Avebury. And Avebury is known as the Serpent Temple Complex because it's a huge snake that kind of spirals across the landscape. And there's 3 sections of Avebury. You have the center concentric stone circle system. You have the tail end of the snake and the head end of the snake. So you talked about what they might be doing with the actual voltage from the lightning. Lightning is a massive amount of voltage, and it has to be directed and controlled to be able to utilize any portion of that. And when it hits the ground, the majority of the voltage from lightning is going to be completely dissipated. So they were only harnessing a very small fraction of that, but they were able to allocate exactly where it went. This will apply to the iron veins across the Giza Plateau that I have mapped, and those iron veins connect all of the structures on the Giza Plateau. Same thing with the stone avenues that connect Avebury into the head end of the complex. Did you guys walk the West Kennet Avenue of stones? We'll talk about that here in just a second.
Okay.
The mineral composition of those stones, again, we're going back to the construction materials. Another earth resource where all of the construction materials have very specific properties that have different functions within the system. Okay, so the Avebury complex at large. It's not just Avebury. There's a whole bunch of different structures that are connected into the Avebury Serpent Temple complex. So again, you have there the center of the snake, you have the tail end down Beckhampton Avenue, and the head end over at the smaller concentric circle all the way to the right. You'll also notice there's Silbury Hill in here and a structure called Windmill Hill. Okay, that nomenclature is telling you exactly what that thing is for creating wind circulation into the atmosphere. You'll also see Cheryl Hill and the Hackpen Hill, both of which are inscribed with white horses, this ancient symbol for cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds. And we'll get to both the Cheryl Hill and the Hackpen Hill in a massive discovery that I just had about 2 days ago, and I'll show you that here in just a second. But this is the overall layout of the complex. Okay, so going back to dielectrics, stones are not conductors of electricity. They're insulators. They're dielectric materials, which basically means that they have a capacity for storing an electric field. They don't allow the electric current to flow. They store that electric field. It's how a battery works, is you have 2 conductors and a dielectric in the middle. The dielectric is an insulator that stores that electric field within the battery. So red granite, limestone, and basalt are all dielectric materials. Okay, Avebury. I forget the guy's name that was on here talking about how Avebury comes alive in the morning.
Okay.
He was on here,
Ellis?
yeah, recently talking about the white figures in the Great Pyramid King's Chamber.
Oh, sure.
And Avebury comes alive in the morning.
Yep.
And the electric field accumulation starts in the morning.
Sure, yeah.
That's now I disagree with the spiritual side of it.
Yeah.
But there's a specific mechanism of why that happens.
Okay.
And I'm a stickler for mechanisms of operation, explaining the exact how and why these things happen. So they know that the electric field begins to accumulate in Avebury in the morning. 100% true. So telluric currents are diurnal, which means they flow east to west, following the sun during the day, and they flow north to south, following the Earth's magnetic poles at night. Avebury is directly designed to accumulate that telluric current flow. You'll see an opening on the east side of the structure and an opening on the north side of the structure. So that is designed to allow that telluric current flow to enter the site in the morning, following the east to west current, and at night from north to south, following the north to south opening. So the structure is specifically designed to accumulate those diurnal telluric currents flowing east to west during the day and north to south at night. That's why that phenomenon happens. And they would also find, I don't think they ever tested this. Of course, they tested it during the day because you can go out there during the day. I guarantee you if they tested it at night, they would find more telluric current accumulation coming north to south, because that's the direction that they flow, is diurnal, east to west during the day, north to south at night. That's why Avebury is configured with the openings on the east to west and north to south. And they're slightly off center. They're not directly aligned to the coordinal directions because, again, they're harnessing subterranean resources like water.
They're off-center to the same degree that the Earth's tilt is off-center.
Correct.
Which is pretty interesting.
Again, Earth's magnetic field, it's all aligned to these subterranean telluric currents. They knew exactly what they were doing when they built these things to optimize the accumulation of the power source.
So, I mean, back to the people that were doing this. So you had this climate change that happened in northern Africa. And so, I mean, do you think that the technology and the desire to do this in Europe and parts of Africa and Asia, do you think that happened when this climate change was happening that forced people out of the Sahara? Do you think that could have been the catalyst for seeing all of these stone structures pop up at basically the same time? Do you think that climate change could have been the catalyst for why we see it happening in all of these different places at the same time?
Good question. So I do think that the stone circles precede the construction and operation of the Egyptian pyramids. So what was happening in the upper eastern Sahara during the Saharan humid period appears to be a relatively localized phenomenon, where it was transforming that specific area. I think the stone circles were built literally right after the cataclysm at the end of the last ice age. Let's say 11,000 BC, 10,000 BC. Then there were 3,000 years of the development of this technology that was implemented during the Saharan humid period to capitalize on that climate change, to build the best execution of the technology that had ever existed. In Egypt, which is the source of the most abundant raw materials for these processes, Egypt has the best quality of stone by far. The quality of the limestone, the quality of the granite, the quality of the black basalt, and the abundance of these construction materials are what allowed the Egyptian pyramids to be built. Egypt is the prime location for all of these things. Now, the Egyptian pyramids may have also had a direct effect. We're talking about creating cumulonimbus thunderstorms. I've also proposed the idea that they were directly terraforming and that they built the Egyptian pyramids and these White Horse Hill systems, and that was directly correlated to the Saharan humid period. They brought the rain. So it may not have been a natural transformation. The Egyptian pyramids and associated landscape structures like the White Horse Hills, they generate thunderstorms. rain and lightning. So what if they built them out in the desert to create rainstorms and completely terraform the upper eastern Sahara using this technology that was developed for 3,000 years?
To attempt to bring rain to the region.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Ancient technology for terraforming.
Yeah, fascinating. So the evidence for that would be where?
So that's more of a speculation.
Yeah.
Because the Sahara is now a desert again.
Right.
People have always said, you want to find the secrets of ancient civilization, vacuum out the sand in the Sahara.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you'd really find some answers. We don't know what's out there.
Right.
All I can say is that the technology has the capability to do that. So if you're creating landscape structures like White Horse, Cumulonimbus thunderstorm generators, and you have fertilizer from the pyramids, you can use those two to completely transform a desert into farmland. And I think that's what they were doing. Now, whether it be natural and all of a sudden the climate just started to change and there's great rain and they're like, oh, let's capitalize on this.
What do you think was happening at the Richat structure?
So that, again, that's not really my bag. I don't think it was Atlantis. If anything, it's a massive stone circle. But it's most likely a completely natural formation. Anybody that knows the electric universe work, they've shown how the Richat structure is an electrical discharge phenomenon from celestial scale electrical discharge here on the planet. I'm a huge fan of the electric universe theory and Thunderbolts project. Highly recommend. Shout out Andy Hall and the Thunderbolts channel. You got to have Andy Hall on here. He's the man. And he was...
Ryan, you got that?
I'm gonna shout out a few people that I really like and respect during this thing because I love to show love to the community at large. And again, I've been a huge fan of Andy's for a long time and a follower of the Electric Universe Theory Thunderbolts channel. And one morning I woke up and my email, people were blowing me up. They were like, dude, did you hear Andy Hall just made a 40-minute long video? So he's an engineer that had a lifelong career in building and operating cogeneration power and electrical plants. He designed chemical and electrical plants and operated these things. So he is 100% one of the technically qualified people to critique my work. And again, for people that are curious of the scrutiny that went into this hypothesis before I published it, I worked with a chemical engineer before I published my book. So I developed the theory, but I wanted to make sure that before I published anything that I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's. So I work with a chemical engineer who is an associate professor of chemical engineering at the University of Maine, has a number of patents for chemical manufacturing processes. And he said in my initial presentation to him, he's like, I'm going to treat you like one of my grad students. And he tore this whole thing to shreds and had me take each little scrap and build it all back. And at the end of the day, you'll look and his name is in the acknowledgments in my book because he believed in my work so much that he allowed me to put his name in my book. And that was one of so I kept this secret for like 3 years. From 2017 to 2020, I only told like 3 people what I was doing. My dad, Ed, the chemical engineer, and Alan from Sacred Geometry Decoded. Shout out Alan, Sacred Geometry Decoded. Go check his work out on YouTube. One of the few people that I contacted to vet this material and to run it by some people to make sure that it made sense. So Alan was the first person I contacted. He was the first person that ever saw this hypothesis. At the end of my initial presentation, he got up and he gave me a standing ovation. He's like, you cracked it, mate. Congratulations. Then I contacted my father, who is a lifelong, or was, rest in peace, Dad, I love you, lifelong military guy, colonel in the Army, real ball buster. And I knew that if he thought I was full of shit, that he would call my bluff and say, put it to bed. But at the end of this thing, he was like, you really got something here. And he was the one that helped get me in touch with Ed Elton. The universe works in mysterious ways. And by a very serendipitous series of events, my dad a lifelong atheist, hard-ass military guy, somehow ended up going to see a presentation on the, what was it? It was either tarot or some esoteric presentation given by a Rosicrucian guy. Ed, this chemical engineer, is a Rosicrucian. And he ended up talking to Ed at the end of the presentation, something I never thought my dad would do. He goes to this presentation, meets with Ed, talks to Ed about my work. Ed's like, yeah, I want to hear about it. He got us in touch, and Ed did the technical vetting of my work. There's also been several other papers published about my work. Alexandre Kasyanchuk, PhD mathematician and physicist, published an article that I'll show you here in just a second. And, vetted people in a variety of industries, from the petroleum industry, electrical engineers, people that work in sonochemistry. So sonochemistry is an area of modern chemistry where they use ultrasound to facilitate chemical reactions as a catalyst, which is directly related to red granite, the creation of ultrasound, and the function of the Great Pyramid. It's not piezoelectricity. It's the opposite.
Okay. So the function of the Great Pyramid, then, can we like just dive into that one and just, like, what are the chambers for? What are the various components of it?
Yeah, it's a huge discussion.
Is it? Yeah.
And I have a whole series.
Yeah.
We'll get to it.
You've done it before, I know. So I mean, we could do like a shortened down version. I want to cover as many of the structures as we can.
Yeah. I have. We're just at the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
In terms of the presentation. So we already talked about John Burke. They tested these electric fields accumulating in the structure, right? So this is just showing you what happens at Avebury. The external enclosure is a reservoir. The entire system is designed for the uptake of telluric currents that creates a positive electric charge on the surface of the Earth. That's a target for lightning strikes. Basic premise of all the stone circles. And Avebury had 2 obelisks, standing stones, at the center of the structure. Okay, so now
are they capturing that? Are they capturing the lightning or like plasma and using it? Are they storing it for anything else? Like, is anything else happening in your mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to build it. I got to build it. We'll get there.
That.
I promise we're going to get there.
All right.
But it's only a small fraction of the voltage.
Yeah.
And they aren't capturing it in the conventional sense, like using the electricity for powering light bulbs or anything like that.
Okay.
It's directly connected to the system itself.
Okay. We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
But I have more proof.
Good.
Okay, so proof of lightning strikes at stone circles. This is the Calanase stone circle. Very similar configuration to Avebury, with the standing stone obelisk at the center of the stone circle and avenues of stone that lead out from the primary circle. So the University of St. Andrews did a geophysical investigation of the structure, and they found, using magnetic sensing equipment, a magnetic signature at the center of the structure that is, quote, interpreted as indicative of past lightning strikes. So they have a huge magnetic signature from lightning strikes at the center of the stone circle.
Perfect. There's your proof.
Literal proof of this hypothesis that lightning was striking ancient stone circles. And they say that it would happen multiple times. So let me quote this again here. So lightning strikes have been previously recorded in geophysical data as magnetic anomalies. The guy was also talking about the magnetic signature at Avebury. It's remnant magnetism from lightning strikes. So now we're establishing proof of this hypothesis. So I always like to provide the receipts for any claims that I make. Here is the direct proof that lightning was striking these systems.
And this is from who?
This is the University of St. Andrews.
Okay.
In conjunction with the University of Wales and the University of Bradford.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there additional sites that they're looking at as well? Or?
Not that I know of. This was the main one that was published, but
okay.
You go to any stone circle site and you'll find these magnetic and electric field anomalies. That was the whole premise of John Burke's work in the Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, is they went out with electrostatic voltmeters and magnetometers and they measured all of these fields. Again, he thought it was for the manipulation of the DNA of seeds, with lightning being an unintended consequence of the electric field accumulation.
So is it granite, limestone, and basalt would all naturally attract lightning? Is that right?
So the telluric currents
Yeah.
and the stones accumulate electric fields.
Yeah.
So the stones are dielectrics. Most of these ancient stone circles are made of sandstones. And we'll get to the chemical composition of the stones in Avebury, which also have a significant concentration of iron. So the stones themselves are building up a phenomenon called dielectric polarization, that when these telluric currents flow into the stone, the electric charge within the dielectric material creates a positive charge in the direction of the current flow. So the stones themselves are just storing the electric field.
Okay. Got it.
On the surface of the ground.
Okay. Got it. But the lightning itself is hitting the stone because the stone has become the target because of the energetic field that's accumulated around the stone on the ground.
Correct. Yeah. With the primary central standing stone or obelisk being the shortest path to ground. So when lightning strikes, it will typically strike the shortest path to ground, which is why you put lightning rods on the top of buildings, because you give it the shortest path to neutralize that charge buildup. So again, what you're doing is creating a positive charge on the ground that's giving it a location, a target.
Sure.
And the standing stone is just the tallest object on the landscape. So when you go to Avebury, if you took away the city, Avebury is in the middle of a massive depression. And it literally is a perfect, they tell you a couple places not to be during a lightning strike is on the top of a mountain or in like a huge valley area where you are the tallest point. And that's how all of these stone circle sites are configured. They're either on the tops of hills where they're the highest point on the landscape, or they're in the middle of an open field where the stone circle and the obelisk itself is the shortest path to ground.
And so they're lightning striking these things. They're using it as fertilizer. They're using it as ceremonial purposes. They're using it like to just the sheer awe of the lightning strike itself. And you know, it's ritualistic or religious in some sense. It's a solstice thing in the middle of the summer. They're gathering around this thing and waiting for lightning to strike. We're going to get to potentially the any additional use that they might have for
Correct.
the energy itself.
Correct.
But, that's kind of what's happening, I guess, right?
So lightning was viewed as a god by this ancient Neolithic civilization. In the Japanese culture, it was referred to as the dragon. To these Druids, it was the serpent deity. To the Mesoamericans, it was Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. So they were able to control the place where God descended from the heavens and struck the earth. And that's the nomenclature that we hear in the mythology, specifically in Japan, that these ancient Joman sites and some of these sacred sites around Japan are the place where deity came down from heaven and touched the earth. Lightning strike. It would have been the most awe-inspiring natural event that could be witnessed by this ancient civilization. So they would have had an intense fear, curiosity, awe, and reverence for this massive electrical discharge that illuminated the sky. And this Neolithic civilization started studying the phenomenon. And they noticed that, we'll get to this when we talk about a Japanese structure that is evidence of the dawn of the technology. They saw lightning hitting these natural outcrops of stone. They noticed that when the lightning god, came and touched the rock, the area around that has tons of food because of the rain and the atmospheric nitrate fertilizer. The food around here is great. There's tons of stuff to gather and forage, and there's lots of animals that go there as well because they capitalize on those same food supplies. So what if we try to replicate that? Replicate the natural formations and build our own stone circle outcrops, and we can bring the lightning god from over here to here and here and here. So that's the dawn and the mindset of this Neolithic civilization. So again, you have to put yourself in the mindset of an ancient hunter-gatherer, and there's an unfortunate stigma about Neolithic hunter-gatherers that this civilization was somehow primitive because they lived in conjunction with nature. I actually think that's a more sophisticated way to live, and we're the primitive ones. Our ancient Neolithic ancestors would laugh at how pathetic and weak we are, and our lack of knowledge in regard to surviving in the wilderness and understanding the cycles of nature and the forces of Earth. We have lost all connection to that.
Yeah.
You know, the vast majority of our population would be dead in 2 weeks if you put them out in the woods. But our ancient Neolithic ancestors were so sophisticated that they understood they could survive in any circumstance. So there were people within this civilization, like the Druids, that were the researchers that investigated these ancient natural phenomenon. They studied them. They tracked the cycles of the moon. They tracked the cycles of the earth. They tracked the tides. And they recognized that there's a correlation between all of these phenomena. Again, we're talking about the dawn of the ancient technology. How did this knowledge develop? They studied nature. They learned from all of these forces of nature that they could take these natural resources and replicate them within megalithic stone technological structures to bring these forces to specific areas.
Well, it's fascinating stuff. So, yeah, I mean, where do you want to? We'll take a quick break anytime because lunch is here. So Ryan's texted me.
Oh,
already,
okay.
But
yeah, we can take a break now. So again, we got so much ground to cover.
I know.
And this is just like the introduction and preface to a long conversation that's going to get us into the White Horse Hills, the Serapeum, the Sphinx Avenue step-down voltage transformers, the function of the step pyramid, red pyramid, bent pyramid, great pyramid. All of that is coming up. But again, it's super important to me in regard to the circulation and introduction of my research to any new viewers or new people that haven't heard of this, to provide all of the supporting evidence to document the step-by-step mechanisms of operation of how all of this developed. And nobody talks about the evolution, how this technology was developed. And to me, it makes a lot of sense that it's by studying nature. It's not a huge leap of the imagination that a Neolithic civilization would have recognized the power of a lightning bolt. And they would have been able to see the difference in the quality of the food supplies near these lightning strikes because of atmospheric nitrates that improve the quality of what they were hunting and gathering. So maybe we take this configuration and we build it over here, and all of a sudden lightning is striking the area where they want to grow more food.
Do you think Göbekli Tepe and all the Tepe Pillars and stuff were for the same purpose? Do you think that they were being struck?
So it does appear that Göbekli Tepe has some similar configuration. That's a structure that I haven't really looked into too much. So I'm not well versed enough in the configuration of the whole site to be able to say for sure. But I will say that a friend of mine, shout out Teru, went to Göbekli Tepe, and there's a big hill behind Göbekli Tepe where they say that there was a structure on top of that hill. So yes, I think there's a technological connection between stone circles and what was happening at Göbekli Tepe. Yeah, that's just one structure I haven't really dived into too much.
Okay. So maybe before we take a break, then, what's a good way to close out this first half?
Okay, so now we've established the premise of the power source and the dawn of ancient technology. Then we're going to get into the Cumulonimbus thunderstorm generators, where they were creating these thunderstorms. I'll show you exactly how that would have happened. This directly applies to the function of structures like Luxor Temple Complex and Karnak Temple in Egypt. And I'll show you that there's a direct mathematical connection between the configuration of Avebury and the configuration of the Luxor Karnak Temple Complex in Egypt. A mathematical correlation that connects these two civilizations and two distinct structures who both have very similar functions.
Let's do it. Let's look at that.
Yeah. Well, it's lined up.
Good.
And then we'll get into the Serapeum, the Egyptian pyramids, and a detailed explanation of how all of the Egyptian pyramids operate. This is, it has to go, in my opinion, it has to go sequential.
Good.
Establishing the premise of ancient physics and chemistry technology that gradually evolved into the function of the Egyptian pyramids.
Good.
Because I don't want to take a huge leap and then lose the connection between these stone circle systems and the Egyptian pyramids, because there's a direct connection that links these two things.
Okay. Perfect.
So Ryan, if you would pull that back up, and I'll go ahead and move forward a little bit, because I think we're on the same page about the connection to lightning. Okay, so another important point to make here. Basically, lightning effectively searches for locations of charge buildup. We've established that. And so when it comes to Stonehenge, so let me finish here. For effective charge and discharging, but also persistent features like stones and conductive minerals will tend to get struck multiply over time. So again, establishing the connection between the natural resources, buildup of charge on the surface, and the location for lightning strikes. So another important point here is that when lightning hits dry rock surfaces, it does not penetrate down, it extends outward along the surface of the ground in a distance proportionate to the current density. Okay, so lightning strikes the ground. The voltage goes in all directions, in the path of least resistance, in a distance that is related to the density of the current, the amount of voltage. The more voltage from lightning, the further it goes. This is super important when understanding the function of the step-down voltage transformer system. The Sphinx step-down avenues, and the avenue of stones leading out of Avebury. So Stonehenge, also a facility that was designed to attract lightning strikes. And we know that the altar stone, the central stone of Stonehenge, is different than all the rest of them. There's been a big discussion about this altar stone from Stonehenge. They brought it from Scotland. It was moved a very, very long way for a specific reason. All of the sarsen stones and stones of Stonehenge are made of silicaceous sandstone, high content silica. The altar stone is micaceous sandstone, that is high mica content. Mica is an electrical insulator, a high capacity dielectric that is specifically related to high voltage applications. So they brought that stone specifically because of the mica content to directly impact the function of the stone as the lightning rod.
How is this not talked about? How is this not a theory? Out of all the theories for Stonehenge, I've not heard that the lightning rod theory before.
Yeah.
But it just seems very logical as a possibility for what was going on there.
So again, there's kind of two camps, temples or tombs, or aliens and power plants. There's not really any middle ground, and there's not anyone else I know in this community of researchers that even bothers to focus on the function of all these other structures or the materials themselves. I've done an indescribable amount of research that led into all this presentation and this hypothesis that has also taken me all around the world to physically visit these sites. And you have to specifically look at the material properties of the construction materials because they tell you exactly what it's for. If you see mica, and we'll see mica in Teotihuacan, it's because of high voltage. It's a high voltage electrical insulator and dielectric for storing those electric fields. They use specific materials for specific functions that are directly integrated into these overall systems. So we're talking about the connection between the moon, tides, and lightning. Well, Stonehenge tracks the position of the sun in conjunction with the position of the moon for tracking tides, because they understood that there was an effect between the position of the moon, the position of the sun, the conjunction, the tides, and lightning strike occurrence. Same thing with Avebury that you can see here, tracking the tides and tracking the phases of the moon. Here's another paper called The Moon Effect on Lightning, which basically corroborates everything that I just said regarding the effect of moon, tides, and the frequency of lightning strikes. So they were studying these celestial conjunctions, studying the forces of nature, and they understood over a very long period of time that there was a connection between all of these forces. So they encoded this knowledge into the structures to communicate to later civilizations that, hey, this is what we were paying attention to, because they knew that it was directly connected to the power source of these structures. So again, we've already talked about obelisks as lightning rods. This is a huge granite outcrop in Japan. That's me standing next to this huge piece of granite. And in Japan, they have these things called shimenawa, which is this little rope and lightning symbols at the top of this thing. And I'll show you, you can't really see it in this picture, but there's a rope around the top of the rock. You can see it on the left. There's a twisted rope around the top of it at the peak of the stone. And there's little white streamers that are attached to this piece of rope. That's called a shimenawa, and shide are the little pieces of paper that are lightning. It represents thunderstorms and lightning strikes. It's literally a symbol that this was a lightning strike location. This is another stone obelisk, standing stone or menhir, at a structure called the Ogami Gaishi Stone Circle, also in Japan. Huge magnetic field around this structure. We tested the magnetic field, and I have video of me sticking my head in a little magnetic hole in one of these things, and like you can feel the magnetic field. Normally, magnetic field on a magnetometer in microtesla is something from like 40 to 60 microtesla. The readings went up to like 1,500 microtesla. And this stone is covered with pockmarks and scars and vitrification because it was being struck by lightning. More standing stone menhir obelisks across the UK, all of which have similar pockmark and scar features. This is a Washington monument in Washington. Gets struck by lightning often enough where they can catch it on camera. Again, the function of obelisks, it's higher electrical potential that gives lightning the ideal place to strike. That's why they have these tall, pointed standing stones that operate as lightning rods. Okay, so this is at a site called Oshido Ishi Hill, a natural outcrop in Kumamoto, Japan, right on the precipice of the Aso volcano. And these are andesite stones, which means they have a bunch of magnetite content. This is another site where there's a profound magnetic field. And this is what it looks like here. You can see the pointed top of this thing, and the whole thing is covered with pockmarks and scars. You can see the pointed top of this thing where it's vitrified that stone because these things get struck with lightning. Here's the size of these things. There's my wife, Alexa. Shout out to my wife, Alexa, Archaeoalchemy. If you haven't already, go subscribe to her channel too. My travel partner, my beloved wife. And, she's the best for doing all of the crazy things that we do in this adventure that we call life in the investigation of these ancient structures. So Archaeoalchemy, shout out Lex. Okay, a paper by researchers at the Kumamoto University who studied these stones, and they also came to the conclusion that the magnetic field in these stones is caused by lightning strikes. So this goes back to the mindset of the Neolithic civilization and developing this ancient technology where they were studying these natural formations and they saw that the lightning was transforming the landscape by atmospheric nitrates. So this is the chemical reaction that happens in the atmosphere when lightning strikes that creates these atmospheric nitrate fertilizers. And the rain brings these nitrate fertilizers down to the ground to fertilize crops. So that's what they were doing. They were studying these things, and they were bringing the ground and the areas where they were either hunter-gathering or farming back to life. This is why farmers love lightning, and this is a distribution of stone circles all over the UK. They're all over the place. This is why they were reestablishing their civilization, going back to the point of origin conversation. Let's say there was a diaspora from Atlantis, and they all went to these different areas across the world to start building structures again. They built them all over the UK to ensure that there was rain, lightning, and fertilizers for all of the agricultural areas across the area.
Is there any evidence of this in the Sahara? Like any evidence of stone pillars or obelisks or remnants of anything happening?
So they do have a stone circle in Egypt, the Nabta Playa stone circle, which is very, very small, but I did an episode on that a while back where it looks like Nabta Playa is actually located kind of on one of these White Horse Hills. And again, the Sahara, let's do some excavation,
Right.
and remove some of that sand.
Yeah.
And then we'd really be able to tell what but there is a stone circle in Egypt. It's called Nabta Playa. Relatively small, but it may have had the same function as some of these big ones. It's also a lunar tracker. So again, we're talking about the Japanese Jomon civilization, the civilization that built these this is called the Arahabaki, one of the Jomon deities, which is actually a deity for plasma formations in the sky. Again, a la electric universe theory in the Thunderbolts project. Okay, so see this big twisted rope and those white things hanging down from the twisted rope? That's called the Shimenawa and Shide. These adorn all of the Japanese temples, and these ancient megalithic sites where lightning was striking, they all are wrapped with a rope that have this lightning strike. So the twisted rope itself is called the Shimenawa. It's a symbol of a thunderstorm cloud. The Shide are the white ropes, which represent lightning, and those sheaves are agricultural material. So there's a direct connection in Japanese mythology between thunderstorms, lightning, and agriculture. And they've adorned all these ancient sites with the symbolism. Again, we were talking about the deities across the planet that connect lightning, rain, and agriculture. These deities of fertility. Ammon, the Egyptian deity, is a deity of fertility. Ammon is the etymological root word of our word for ammonia. That's where we get the word for ammonia. He was the deity of fertilization, the deity of fertility. He was the fertilizer god. There's esoteric communication encoded in the deities of ancient Egypt that indicate their knowledge of ancient industrial scale chemistry. So there's tons of gods across the planet that are connected. This is Susanoo, again, giving the gift of agriculture to humanity. He's the thunderstorm deity of Japan. So this brings us to Japanese pyramids and Pyramid Coromanta. So one of the most fascinating structures that we visited during our research expedition to Japan, our first one in September 2024, was the Coromanta Pyramid. And this structure is associated with tons of UFO sightings. So they see, this is an ancient drawing of the Coromanta Pyramid, and these balls, these glowing balls of light that hover above the Coromanta Pyramid. In my opinion, they are not UFOs. It's a phenomenon called ball lightning, which is a plasma phenomenon that's directly associated with electrical storms. So they have these ball lightning phenomenon that appear above the Coromanta Pyramid, a structure that's directly connected with these electrical lightning storms. So ball lightning also has strange smells like sulfurous odors and electrical buzzing. So a lot of people that witness these ball lightning phenomenon misinterpret it as being unidentified flying objects. So there's tons of UFO mythology associated with the Coromanta Pyramid. But in my opinion, it's actually ball lightning. And ball lightning is symbolized in Japanese mythology as a creature called the Raiju, which is like this mythological creature that is, again, been interpreted as directly connected to thunderstorms and ball lightning. So again, there's mythology in Japan that encodes this knowledge of this lightning technology. All of the symbolism in Japan is indicative that they knew what was going on with these stone circle systems in terms of the connection between thunderstorms, lightning, and fertility. So this is the book, The Pyramid of the Gods, that describes the excavation of Pyramid Coromanta. And he goes through, and this is just some of the clips from the book. They excavated the top of this pyramid, which they did ground-penetrating radar that showed that this was actually a pyramid structure, a man-made pyramid in Japan, proven by ground-penetrating radar. And they excavated the top of this thing. And one day they were excavating the foundation of the temple. They discovered a stone circle temple at the top of this pyramid. They were excavating the foundation of it, and they cracked into the foundation of the internal chamber structure. And he makes the comparison between the Coromanta Pyramid and the Great Pyramid because they found granite chambers inside of this Japanese pyramid. So they cracked into the top of this thing, and all of a sudden, they go down to take a lunch break or something. They look back up, and there's flames shooting out of the top of the mountain. And this is a legitimate archaeological documentation of the excavation of Pyramid Coromanta. So he's saying here how all of a sudden there's flames coming out of the top of this pyramid, because what they did is they cracked into a gas reserve that was inside of this pyramid. And the gas was leaking out and got ignited, most likely by a lightning strike, and there's flames shooting out of the top of this pyramid. And he makes the connection that it must have something to do with either underground cavities, subterranean gas reserves that create these flames shooting out of the top of the pyramid during the excavation of the site. So it's a crazy archaeological excavation of this pyramid structure. And here's an image of the stone circle temple that they discovered at the top of this Japanese pyramid, which has internal reaction chambers that are akin to the Great Pyramid. They've never fully excavated this thing. This project was completely abandoned. They went back and nobody ever excavated the site again.
Wow.
Yeah. Really, really crazy story about Pyramid Coromanta. He's talking about this is where he's talking about underground shafts, the connection between the granite chambers and the Egyptian pyramids, king chambers. So he was right there. And he even makes the proposition that it must be connected to some sort of chemical reaction. And there was something mysterious going on about the pyramids related to chemical. He was right there. So close. But he never actually proposes a concrete hypothesis for the function of the structure. So here's the GPR results and the diagrams of the stepped pyramid structure, the stone circle temple at the top, and the internal box shape and circular chambers inside of this Japanese pyramid. So there are 100% man-made pyramids in Japan.
And why haven't they excavated it?
They say it's because of risk of landslide. And also in Japan, they're very protective about ancient sites. And for example, the Kofun structures, very few of those have ever been fully excavated, because once something is designated a sacred ancient site, they don't mess with it and they don't excavate it. It's part of the culture and the respect for ancient structures in Japan is there's not a lot of archaeological and excavation that goes on with these things. But they say it's because of risk of collapse. But also the members of this team that were investigating this, he goes and tells a story how all of them started mysteriously dying.
Really?
Yeah, after this project, all of them started dying off from mysterious consequences. Yeah. Fascinating structure.
Yeah.
So this pyramid...
Do you have numbers on that? Do you know how many people were involved and how many people died off?
I forget the details of the story, but he tells a brief overview of kind of what happens to everybody in the aftermath of the excavations. And he was one of the few surviving members of the team that didn't suffer one of these unfortunate accidents or whatever happened. So this structure is directly connected into a system of stone circles. So these are the Oyu stone circles, and we find stone circles all over Japan.
They're connected.
Correct. There's an avenue of stones, parallel stones, that connect these stone circles directly into the pyramid complex. So these are the two Oyu stone circles. You can see the pathway of the connection between the two circles, and then there's also a connection that goes off that connected Pyramid Coromanta into the two stone circles. And he's saying here how the whole landscape is basically connected. Coromanta Pyramid, the Oyu stone circles, and this whole landscape is an interconnected system. Exactly like what we have at Avebury. Exactly like what we have at the Karnak Temple in Luxor. Interconnected landscape technological systems. It's not just the structure. It's the entire landscape surrounding the structure. And he makes a statement here that this network is linked to the worship of a snake god. Again, lightning, the dragon, the snake god. Same thing as the Avebury Serpent Temple complex. Which brings us to Chichen Itza and the descent of the feathered serpent Kukulkan during the spring equinox. So are you familiar with this phenomenon?
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, how this feathered serpent moves down the side of Chichen Itza, represents the descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity, onto the pyramid of Chichen Itza.
If it even happened when it was originally built. There's debate about that.
Yeah.
Whether or not the snake actually existed on the original monument.
Right,
So,
yeah. But Kukulkan, this feathered serpent deity, is the dragon. It's the same thing. They were all not necessarily worshiping, but lightning was revered as a deity by this ancient civilization. It would have, again, the most powerful phenomenon that they could possibly witness, the power of God coming down from the heavens that had remarkable transformations. Again, this deity that we see in all of the mythology connected to fertilization and lightning, it's the God bringing us fertilization, bringing us abundant agriculture.
Is that the handbag potentially? Is there?
So Andy Hall thinks that the handbag of the Sumerians represents cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds. You got to have Andy on. I had a podcast appearance with Andy Hall on the Brainstorm channel. Shout out Spark, Ben, and Finn from the Brainstorm YouTube channel. Go watch my interview with Ben, Finn, and Andy Hall on the Brainstorm channel. And he blew my mind when he interjected his hypothesis about the symbol of the bag related to the convection of air that's integrated into the production of a cumulonimbus thunderstorm cloud. He thinks that's the symbol of, again, carrying the weather, bringing the ability to control weather and terraform would have been essential to this ancient technology. So he thinks that's what the handbag represents. Absolutely fascinating and really blew my mind. So the snake of sunlight that happens during the equinox is the same thing as lightning striking the pyramid. And this March equinox is directly connected to the agricultural season. So when the serpent deity descends on Chichen Itza, it's telling you that lightning and rain are coming for the beginning of the agricultural season. And this article makes an interesting point. Folklore tells us that on the equinox, Kukulkan descends from the sky to the earth, bringing with him the energy of the sun and the gift of water for planting. It is as though the feathered snake is an umbilical cord that provides nourishment to the land. Its vibration energizes the earth, preparing it for new growth. Sounds a lot like a lightning strike, bringing agricultural fertilizer and marking the beginning of the agricultural season for this civilization. So they had the same gods. Kukulkan, the dragon, the serpent of Avebury are all connected to lightning. So this brings us to the stone avenues at Avebury that are connected into Pyramid Coromanta. These stone avenues are step-down voltage transformers. We have them that connect the Sphinx Avenue into Karnak Temple in Luxor as well. So here at Avebury, you have the center concentric circle system, and then we have two stone avenues going out, the Beckhampton Stone Avenue and the West Kennet Stone Avenue. The West Kennet Stone Avenue is directly connected into a structure called the Sanctuary, which is the head end of the Serpent Temple complex. Here in Luxor, the Karnak Temple is also connected via a parallel avenue of stones into the Luxor Temple, which is known as the Temple of Man, which also itself has a head end of this Temple of Man. The Luxor Temple being intended for the interface of the priest and initiate class with these electric fields. The electric fields are also going to accumulate things like negative ions and ozone during these thunderstorms. So we have electric field accumulation, we have ultrasound, we have negative ions and ozone, all three of which have a myriad of therapeutic benefits for the human body. So there are temples that are connected into these structures that were intended for human interface. The Luxor Temple and the Sanctuary of Avebury exactly intended for that purpose. So again, we have this positive accumulation of charge in the sanctuary, the head end of the Serpent Temple complex. That positive charge is going to accumulate negative ions. Negative ions have an extremely beneficial effect on the human body. Same thing as ozone. Ozone is extremely beneficial for human consumption, breathing in that air. And the electric fields also stimulate things like circulation, tissue repair, breakdown of cancer cells, a myriad of therapeutic benefits. So that is the function of capturing some of that voltage and allocating it into other components of the system. So we talked about when lightning strikes the ground, the voltage goes in all directions in the path of least resistance, but it goes not downward, but outward along the ground surface. So you're going to have a portion of that voltage that goes down the Sphinx Avenue. Same thing at Avebury with the West Kennet Avenue that leads down from the Avebury primary stone circle into the sanctuary. This was designed to reduce the voltage. We call them step-down voltage transformers, where each step reduces the voltage from the main lightning strike so that you're getting a precise allocation of voltage into your head end component. This is an analysis of the surface features of the Avebury stone circle step-down voltage transformers that has peeling, vitrified silica glaze, cracks, creases, lamination, pitting, pinholes, ragged holes, hollows, pellets, raised pinholes, raised rings, and iron stains. All the result of high voltage transmission through these stones. These scars, the pinholes, the vitrification of the silica that creates this glass silica glaze on the stone is a direct result of this high voltage electrical transmission through these stones. These stones also have a high content of iron. This is a chemical analysis of the composition of iron in each one of these stones. So they all have a high content of iron, which is the exact same thing that we find in these Sphinx avenues. These are made of Nubian sandstone. And this Nubian sandstone has not only mica, they are micaceous minerals in this Nubian sandstone. Again, we talked about mica being found at Stonehenge, mica being found at Teotihuacan, but they also have iron nodules, pyrite crystals, and silicon dioxide. So pyrite is a semiconductor that is an insulator at low voltage and conductive at high voltage. And in conjunction with the iron nodules makes it perfect for electromagnetic induction and reduction of this voltage as it's sent into the head end component. So these Sphinx Avenue step-down voltage transformers use electromagnetic induction and possibly dielectric breakdown of the air, which lightning is essentially a dielectric breakdown of the air that balances the charges. Same thing happens in the Sphinx step-down voltage transformers, where the voltage is sent into the first stone, inducing magnetic flux within the iron nodules. That magnetic flux induces current that passes down the avenue, sending the reduced voltage down into the Luxor temple. Okay, so now, Ryan, if you would, pull up those Google Earth screenshots. And I'm going to show you something crazy.
Okay.
I just found this out. Maybe 2 days after I put together this presentation, I was doing a live broadcast on my members only channel, and I love to do Google Earth investigations. And we'll talk about the function of the white horses here in just a minute. But look at the distance. So you see in there, the top left, the Cheryl White Horse. That's one of these White Horse Hills, Cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator. The distance from the Cheryl White Horse to the center of the Avebury Serpent Temple complex is 5,300 meters. Okay, go to the next one. This is the distance from the Hackpen White Horse Hill. Avebury is surrounded by White Horse Hills. These apparently natural landscape features. Just so happens the Hackpen White Horse Hill is also exactly 5,300 meters away from the center of Avebury. Okay? Okay, now go to the next one. So this is the distance between the Avebury central stone circle and the sanctuary, the head end at the end of this step-down voltage transformer, 2,300 meters. Okay, so we have these cumulonimbus thunderstorm generators that are creating the thunderstorms that power the system 5,300 meters away. And then we have a step-down voltage transformer that's reducing the voltage from the primary lightning strike being allocated into the interface component designed for human interface, 2,300 meters. So now we're in Luxor. Across the water from the Karnak temple on the right is the Hatshepsut mortuary temple. And that hill face is a cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator. The Hatshepsut temple is a dynastic temple built in this landscape feature. It is exactly 5,300 meters away from the Karnak temple. Go to the next one, and the step-down Sphinx voltage transformer. Guess how far it is away from Karnak temple? Just the last one there, Ryan. Yep.
I'm going with
2,300. 2,300.
Yeah.
So there is a mathematical, indisputable connection between the proximity of the thunderstorm generator and the central voltage receiver, and a precise distance between the primary voltage receiver and the head end of the system.
Crazy.
5,300 meters and 2,300 meters precisely. Also found the same measurement at the White Horse Hill that I discovered at Teotihuacan. There's a White Horse Hill at the pyramid complex of Teotihuacan that has the exact same configuration as the White Horse Hills of Wiltshire, England, Luxor, that was creating the thunderstorm that powered the Teotihuacan complex, which also has, of course, a Quetzalcoatl temple, the lightning god temple. Again, the communication of the symbolism is telling you exactly what these things were doing. If we can learn to read the symbols and the communication encoded in the structures, it will tell you exactly what they were for. So Ryan, let's go back to the presentation.
What is the importance of that distance? Is it just like...
This is such a new discovery that I haven't had a chance to dig into that too much, but there has to be a reason.
Yeah.
I don't fully understand that yet.
It must just maximize the energetic output of the system or something, I guess, right?
It is perhaps related to the separation of the cloud creator and the charge accumulator in the center. They wanted to have enough charge accumulation at the centerpiece that having the structure too close may have interfered with the charge accumulation in the center. So there's a reason for that distance. I don't fully understand why, but there's definitely a mathematical connection. Again, these White Horse Hills are supposed to be just natural hills. Nothing to see here, but secrets in plain sight. Esoteric people love secrets in plain sight, and they'll put symbols right there. You have to know how to read the symbol. And the white horse is inscribed on all of these White Horse Hills that tell you exactly what that feature is doing to generate the white horse, the cumulonimbus lightning storm. And the Hackpen and White Horse Hills are exactly 5,300 meters from the center of Avebury.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's wild.
It is. Yeah.
So this is also directly connected to the function of the Serapeum. Mm-hmm. This step-down voltage transformer, and I wish I had measured it. I'll do it on my channel coming up soon. I want to measure the distance of the Sphinx step-down, because there's a Sphinx Avenue that connected a structure called the Bubastion in Sahara into the Serapeum, which is directly related to the allocation of voltage into the Serapeum for the production of hydrogen. So this is the opening of the Serapeum. Step 1 of the function of the Serapeum or Serapeum, fill with water. You can also see that there's an external enclosure around the Serapeum, which would have functioned as a reservoir for holding the water that was introduced into the Serapeum. Step 1, fill with water. So that electric current being allocated into the Serapeum is going to induce an electric field in these red granite containers, which is going to create ultrasound. Ultrasound can be utilized to create hydrogen and oxygen from water. I'm skipping over the part about the Osirion and the Hypogeum because I have a more detailed explanation of the Serapeum. But the Serapeum is using that allocated voltage to break water into its constituent components, hydrogen and oxygen. So that's the function of the Serapeum. You fill the whole thing with water, the Bubastion gets struck by lightning, the Sphinx step-down voltage transformer sends a percentage of that voltage directly into the Serapeum to induce an electric field in those huge boxes that are ultrasound generators. They are ultrasound transducers.
What does that mean?
So an ultrasound transducer is a device that converts electrical input into ultrasound output. Pretty simple. It's like an ultrasound machine where the input is voltage. It's the inverse piezoelectric property. Everybody talks about piezoelectricity, generating electricity, generating electricity. The output is not electricity. The input is electricity. The output is ultrasound. And we'll talk about how this is directly related to the function of the Great Pyramid that uses an ultrasound catalyst to convert sulfur oxides into sulfur trioxide.
Okay, got it.
The red granite components are catalysts within the Great Pyramid. Ultrasound acoustic catalyst. It's a process known as sonochemistry, where ultrasound is utilized to facilitate chemical reactions. As opposed to a conventional catalyst, which is usually metal, you can also use ultrasound to drive chemical reactions.
Okay, so the Serapeum is the kind of the launching point for the Great Pyramid's ability to be able to do whatever it's doing to be able to create the chemicals that it's creating. The Serapeum was using was generating like sound hypersonic to kickstart the process.
So it's complicated.
Yeah.
And everyone wants a short explanation of the function of these sites.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do it in a short amount of time. So the Serapeum, the output of the Serapeum is hydrogen and oxygen.
What do you mean, the output?
The output of the Serapeum. I have some more slides that break it down.
So lightning strikes, and then the output of the lightning strike is that what you're saying?
So the Bubastion is a structure in Saqqara that is the highest point of elevation in Saqqara. That's where your obelisk or standing stone would have been. Lightning would strike the obelisk, and the voltage was transferred through the stone avenue into the Serapeum, where the induced electric field in the boxes breaks down the water. So you fill the Serapeum with water. That's how it works. You fill the whole thing with water. And those giant boxes are ultrasound transducers. The ultrasound will split the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. It's called sonohydrogen. I have a research paper that shows that this is a real process. So the output of the Serapeum is the hydrogen and oxygen gas.
So where is that gas being created? Within the box itself?
In the water. It'll just break. The ultrasound will flow out of the box and into the water. And that ultrasound breaks down the water molecule that's surrounding the box. You flood the whole system. And each one of those things are generators for ultrasound. So the entire subterranean system is filled with ultrasound waves that are breaking down the water molecule to release hydrogen and oxygen. And there are channels on the top of the Serapeum. The entire thing is angled upward. From the back of the Serapeum, there's a little outlet tunnel that's the drain for the water. The entire thing has channels carved, and I have video documentation of this when I've been inside the Serapeum, showing the entire configuration and walking through the process step by step. So step one is filling the Serapeum. Lightning strikes the obelisk. The voltage is sent into the Serapeum itself, including the boxes. That voltage creates an electric field in the box itself, which creates ultrasound, because these are all red granite. Some of them are black granite, but they're all granite in the Serapeum. So those quartz crystals are going to create ultrasound vibrations. The gas rises out of the water and it flows up the channel to the outlet and collection point that was at the top of the Serapeum to collect the hydrogen and oxygen.
Okay. Let's pause there.
Yeah.
And let's take a break, and we'll get a bite to eat, and we'll look at some faces, and we'll come back, and then we'll get into what happens next right after that step. Right after that, we'll try to come back and finish off that process.
Yeah. So the Sahara complex is a huge hydrocarbon processing complex.
Yep.
With a variety of different structures using hydrocarbon deposits below the step pyramid.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Oh, yeah.
All right, cool.
We got so much more to go.
Awesome. Look
All
forward
right,
to it.
Take a break.
Yep, very good. Cool. Welcome back.
We're back.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for lunch.
Yeah, for sure.
And for the tour.
Yeah, the vases.
Awesome.
What do you think?
Really, really cool collection.
Yeah.
I've seen them all in museums, but it's awesome to be able to see them up close. And it's fascinating. As we were just saying, they built the pyramids. Of course, they had exquisite stonework that applied to all other aspects of the civilization. But it's an amazing collection. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, if they could build the pyramids, they can build the vases. And we see the same metrology in the vases that we see in the pyramids.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that same royal cubit system. But, well, cool. Yeah. So where were we in terms of the presentation?
Okay, so we were about to get to Teotihuacan. We were kind of talking about the symbolism that's encoded in the structures. We had done an introduction into these systems called White Horse Cumulonimbus thunderstorm generators. And I know it can be overwhelming to go through all of this. No one else in the history of podcasting has ever attempted to do what we are doing right here and right now, which is discuss the function of all of the ancient technology across the planet in one single recording.
Let's do it.
So it's an absolutely monumental undertaking. And I sincerely appreciate your patience as I work through all of this stuff. Because again, it's important for me, for my research, to establish a foundation of evidence that supports all of these conclusions. So the next step, Ryan, if you would just pull that presentation back up, we'll jump into Teotihuacan, just so I can explain how the symbolism of Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, this lightning deity, is also directly connected to the function of the Teotihuacan complex in Mexico, which I don't know of anyone else that's proposed a hypothesis for the function of Teotihuacan, including all my other hypotheses. I don't know anybody else who's touched Teotihuacan. And I don't think I've actually talked about this publicly yet, so you'll be the first person to hear this on a public platform, the function of Teotihuacan. And I don't know, the measurement's not coming up here on this screenshot for some reason, but we just measured this. And the distance from the pyramid and temple of Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, they're the same thing. One is Mayan, one is Aztec. I think this is Quetzalcoatl here at the Teotihuacan complex. But the distance between this White Horse Hill, the landscape feature mountain that you can see there on the top left, to the Quetzalcoatl temple is 5,300 meters. It's the exact same measurement that we see at Avebury that connects the thunderstorm generator to the primary lightning strike component. Exact same thing that we saw at the Luxor Temple, Karnak Temple, and the Cumulonimbus thunderstorm generator across the river near the dynastic era Hatshepsut mortuary temple. 5,300 meters is the exact same distance between this White Horse generator and the Teotihuacan complex. So Teotihuacan is another temple complex that's built with one of these water supplies. There's a river that runs right through the site. It also has an avenue of the dead, which is comparable to this step-down voltage transformer system that we have in the Sphinx transformers. And it's made of 3 different structures. You have the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Quetzalcoatl Temple. Again, you see this dragon face descending down the side of the pyramid. That's telling you exactly what this structure is. This is a diagram of the Pyramid of the Moon. The unfortunate thing about Teotihuacan in comparison to the Egyptian pyramids, they haven't really done super extensive excavations inside of these things, and we don't know if there's any internal reaction chamber systems. So it's a bit different execution of chemical technology where they were using tunnels below the structure that served as the reaction spaces. So this is the tunnel that runs below the, I believe this is Pyramid of the Sun, tunnel that runs below the Pyramid of the Sun, huge tunnel and cave network that runs below the entire site. And this is just a comparative difference between the size of the Egyptian pyramids and the size of the Pyramid of the Sun. So it's an absolutely massive structure. So this is the Quetzalcoatl Temple, where they discovered deposits of liquid mercury. Liquid mercury. So they say that they've found huge deposits of liquid mercury, but in all of my research on Teotihuacan, I've never seen an actual picture of it. So that's a little bit unusual in terms of the archaeological reports from Teotihuacan. There's tons of articles talking about the discovery of liquid mercury, but there's no actual pictures of it. And I've done an extensive search, which is a little bit unusual. But this is the general plan of the Teotihuacan complex. You can see the big structure on the top right is this Quetzalcoatl Temple. The Pyramid of the Sun is the next one in the middle, and the Pyramid of the Moon is at the far end. And again, they found these tunnels underneath the structures. They found pyrite spheres, which we've talked about pyrite being included in these Sphinx step-down transformers as a superconductive material, insulating at low voltage and electrically conductive at high voltage. So again, we're finding these same construction materials. All over the world, they're using these high voltage materials, specifically mica and pyrite, for specific functions in each one of these structures. So again, the Temple of the Plumed Serpent, Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, the exact same feathered serpent deity, and the entire complex is connected via this Avenue of the Dead. So this is a reconstruction of the Solar Temple at Abu Ghraib, which I believe is exactly the original configuration of this Quetzalcoatl Temple. You can see the entire top of it has completely been taken down. I think that there was an obelisk or something of that nature at the top of this structure. Again, Solar Temple at Abu Ghraib, not a pyramid. It was actually a huge obelisk temple known as a solar temple. And the Temple of Abu Ghraib is the one where they find all those calcite bowls with the gear type configuration around the outside. It's a very, very mysterious site. Again, Quetzalcoatl telling you exactly what was happening at this structure, being the power source of the entire Teotihuacan complex, powered by lightning. All right, so again, we talked about the connection between Kukulkan, agriculture, and the configuration again. So why were they using liquid mercury? For gold and silver processing. So we know that mercury can amalgamate gold and silver, and liquid mercury is incredibly useful for processing gold and silver ore. So again, the symbolism, this is just an explanation of how gold ore can be extracted using mercury. And again, the symbolism encoded in the site. In the alchemical medieval time period, the sun was a symbol for gold. The moon is a symbol for silver. So by looking at the nomenclature and the symbolism encoded in the Teotihuacan complex, we can figure out exactly what it was doing. Of course, these are modern names that we use to describe this, but I think they were implemented by people in the know. For example, we'll talk about the well shaft of the Great Pyramid. If it's a burial, why does it have a well shaft? And what is a well? It's a source of water. It's a water supply, which is exactly the function of the subterranean chamber and the well shaft system within the Great Pyramid as a water supply for the internal reaction chamber systems. So there's information encoded in this structure that tells you that the Teotihuacan complex was using mercury for processing gold and silver. So this also goes into a discussion about the function of the pyramid body, which I'll get to again in just a minute, but the tetrahedral pyramid shape and the massive body of stones surrounding the reaction chambers of the Egyptian pyramids has a variety of different functions. First one, for preventing environmental contamination. Second, maintaining pressure within the system. 3 for maintaining the stability of the internal reaction chambers, and 4 being the shape of the dielectric itself for concentrating electric fields. And I'll show a study here in a minute that shows that the Great Pyramid of Giza was designed to concentrate and store electric fields, specifically in the area surrounding the king's chamber and the antechamber. So we talked about how those electric fields activate the inverse piezoelectric property for the production of ultrasound. So the geometry of the Great Pyramid and the limestone dielectric were specifically integrated into the function of the structure to store an electric field and concentrate it in the area surrounding the red granite components. There's a full research paper that shows experimentally exactly how this operates. So we talk about in Mesoamerica, all the gold, El Dorado, the city of gold. So of course they were using large-scale industrial structures for processing both gold and silver. Again, these are just some more diagrams. This is the Avenue of the Dead, quote unquote, that connects all of the structures. Same thing as the Sphinx step-down voltage transformer system. And this Hotep right here at the center of the Avenue of the Dead in front of the Pyramid of the Moon very much reminds me of the Hotep at the Solar Temple of Abu Ghraib, which has a very similar configuration. And they did seismic readings. My colleagues at the Asida Project did seismic readings of the circular component in the center of this Hotep. So here on the top left and right-hand corners, you can see on the left the seismic readings of the square component around it. Very little seismic vibrations. But on the center component, you can see pretty extreme vibrations, seismic readings, which are indicative of subterranean water flow. So the Hotep at Abu Ghraib Solar Temple may have water flowing directly below that component. And this is modern. They did this, I think 2014 or 2015, they took these readings, which is a fascinating investigation. I've always thought that center component is very reminiscent of a plug, and we'll talk about plugs here in just a minute. So the water running below the Avenue of the Dead may also be running below this Hotep. And talking about construction materials, again, utilization and optimization of Earth's natural resources and implementing different construction materials for different applications. So the pyramid complex at Teotihuacan is mostly made of loam soils, which has relative conductivity. It's actually relatively good ability to conduct electricity, this type of soil from which the Teotihuacan pyramids were built. And they also have tons of mica that's been discovered at the Pyramid of Teotihuacan. So again, we're seeing mica, same thing as the micaceous sandstone at the altar stone of Stonehenge. Again, anytime you see certain construction materials, it tells you exactly what that component was doing. So we're talking about high voltage applications here. And this breakdown even mentions the voltage applications of mica for thermal insulating and electrical insulating properties. This is just an AI Google search breakdown of why they had mica, and it mentions the electrical applications for insulating and storage of electrical insulating in this high voltage application at the Pyramid of Teotihuacan. So the lightning strikes the Kukulkan Quetzalcoatl Temple, and it distributes voltage throughout the entire system. First, through the Avenue of the Dead, which may or may not have subterranean water flowing below it, and also through this tunnel system. So you put, again, this is just an image of how the system works, sending the voltage and activating the entire complex. Have you ever seen this diagram before?
Yeah, I have actually.
People show this all the time. And they're like, oh, it's an electrical component, but they never say anything about how or why it's powered. I just showed you why and how. The entire system is an interconnected electrical network, the exact same thing that we have on the Giza Plateau that was powered and activated by lightning. So you take your cinnabar mercury ore, which we find all over the site. You put the cinnabar mercury ore in the tunnels below the Quetzalcoatl Temple. And that cinnabar mercury ore is heated by the high voltage, and you extract your liquid mercury. The liquid mercury is then used in the Temple of the Sun to extract gold ore, and in the Temple of the Moon for processing silver ore.
Okay.
Pretty cool. And I've never released this publicly. Main reason being that there's still so much more archaeological investigation, excavation, and study that needs to come forward transparently. For example, no pictures of this liquid mercury. There's article after article after article that talk about the liquid mercury, zero pictures of it. So there's something a little bit unusual about the archaeological documentation going on at this site.
Sure.
And we need to know a lot more about the inner configuration of the reaction chambers, the tunnel system that runs below the site. So there's a ton of work that still needs to be done at the Pyramid of Teotihuacan. But this is my hypothesis, is that the entire temple complex is using liquid mercury for the extraction and processing of gold and silver ore.
So the lightning creates the liquid mercury.
Correct.
And then that exists for workmen, to be able to use on the site for extraction of gold and silver.
So the tricky thing with mercury is it's super toxic. Again, this goes into the function of the pyramid body, insulating the entire system and preventing environmental contamination. So if you're putting your mercury ore below this Temple of the Plumed Serpent, the heat is going to extract the liquid mercury from the cinnabar ore. You would then have a tunnel system that would connect the Temple of the Kukulkan Plumed Serpent into the Pyramid of the Sun, where that mercury ore would flow directly underground into the Temple of the Sun. You wouldn't necessarily want to be putting that down in there manually. And there's a number of vertical, you can see surrounding the Temple of the Plumed Serpent, there's these vertical shafts that go down into the subterranean complex. So that was probably how they were inserting the mercury ore into the underground tunnel system without having to physically go down inside the things. Same thing with the Egyptian pyramids. They were not designed for people to go inside of these structures.
Right.
They're chemical manufacturing machines. Same thing as a modern industrial chemical plant. You're not supposed to go inside of that thing unless there's something seriously wrong. Then you shut down the machine and you have emergency procedures and ways to get inside of there for repairs and things of that nature. But they aren't meant for people to go inside of there.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I understand the process, or at least I think I do. What is the frequency in which they would run this whole program? So how often would lightning strike? Are we talking daily, weekly, multiple times a day? Like kind of what is the frequency in which this would occur?
Fantastic question. And this is one of the big questions that's come up on my channel. This was not a 24/7 operation. So again, like I was saying, everything works in conjunction with natural cycles. There's a buildup of charge. There is the process of creating the cumulonimbus thunderstorm. There's the electrical storm that powers the system. It runs it, and then everything restarts again. And this may have only happened for a certain period of the year. For example, in Egypt, there were 4 different seasons: season of planting, season of growth, season of harvest, and the season of the flood. And there may have only been a specific period of the year during which these thunderstorms were frequent enough for the structures to run. They did all of the manufacturing that was required, and then the system would restart. Everything worked in harmony and conjunction with the forces of nature and the cyclical nature of all of these atmospheric events. And that's a big kind of point of contention, and something that's difficult for people to wrap their heads around is that when I say industrial scale chemistry, they immediately think it has to be 24/7, 365 like we do today. I highly disagree with that. These were ancient ritual structures. The ritual of manufacturing the sacred chemical, this alchemical discipline, would have absolutely been a ritual process. Even the alchemy during the medieval period is all done during certain phases of the moon, where you collect the dew under a certain phase of the moon because it has certain properties that are going to be applicable to your alchemical process. It took time, and I don't necessarily have a way to estimate the time period that it took to manufacture the chemicals within the structure, but I don't think it was a 24/7 operation. It was all cyclical. Again, a process of charging, a process of activation, a process of discharging, and then the whole thing reset.
Yeah, makes total sense.
So that's a fantastic question, Matt, and that's come up a lot. And it's one of the most difficult things for people to wrap their heads around. And I have a bit of a different perspective about the mindset of the civilization than I think most people do. You know, no laser beams, aliens, or Anunnakis, right? Ancient Neolithic, Druidic mindset people, where everything was about the connection between human beings, technology, and nature. It was a synergistic system where all of these things worked together for the benefit of the civilization at large. So I'm not necessarily an advocate, again, talking about the point of origin versus intercontinental travel. I don't necessarily think there was a single point of origin because all of these populations are very genetically distinct. There's some connections, but there's genetically distinct populations all around the world that were utilizing this exact same technology based in the same mechanisms of operation derived from Earth physics and chemistry. So they had to be in communication. There was intercontinental travel. For example, the cocaine mummies, right? You know, they're finding coca leaves in the mummies and all this kind of stuff. Or, you know, there was intercontinental travel. They found Egyptian beads in Neolithic burials in the UK. We know about Queen Scotia, the Queen of Scotland, which was a queen from Egypt that came to the UK and settled in Scotland. So there was absolutely intercontinental travel and sharing of ideas. So that's kind of, again, we talked about a little bit, the difference between point of origin, single point of origin, or intercontinental travel. I tend to lean more toward the intercontinental travel, communication, and sharing of information.
So you've mentioned laser beams and aliens.
Friggin' sharks with laser beams.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
I love
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously that has nothing to do with your theories in terms of the UFO phenomenon or
Right.
aliens or extraterrestrials or whatever. But what is your general thoughts on the topic, regardless of that?
So I like to make percentages.
Yeah.
So when it comes to UFO phenomenon, 99.5% is government technology, top secret technology.
Okay.
And they've created this narrative of unidentified flying objects to single-handedly discredit the belief in top secret technology and also to simultaneously demonstrate the capabilities of top secret technology. 99.9% of, 0.5% of it, top secret government technology. They're trying to obfuscate the existence of the technology, but they're also showing that we have it. And look at the capabilities. So for example, this Tic Tac object that they see off of aircraft carriers, the people who see these things, like Air Force pilots, they don't have top secret clearance. They're not in the know. And what they're doing is testing top secret government technology in proximity to their existing equipment to demonstrate the capabilities of the top secret stuff. They've created a narrative of, UFO phenomenon to say, we don't have this, but also to hint to other countries at look at what we have and look at what it can do.
So having this technology then that can accelerate craft to 40,000 miles per hour, that can almost instantaneously travel from place to place and make full 90-degree turns while going thousands of miles per hour and not break the sound barrier and do all of these things that are being captured and recorded by people and recorded by highly sophisticated electronic equipment, modern electronic equipment. I mean, what's more shocking then that this is that the government has this technology and we don't know about it and we're not using it to end the this problem with pollution and gas and this or is it I mean, that's almost more shocking than being surrounded by a bunch of extraterrestrials flying spacecrafts all over the place.
So I think generally speaking, the estimate is that the technology that we have in our hands is 100 years behind what's actually being developed in secret. And that gradually this technology is released for public consumption. Like GPS, for example. GPS existed way before we had Google Maps. And it was just something that gradually trickled down to the public consumption. I absolutely, again, it's not that I don't believe in UFOs. Again, that 0.5% is the weird stuff. For example, crafts coming out of the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. Some of that, again, we don't have an answer or explanation for what it is. I'm also kind of a fan more of the interdimensionals than extraterrestrials hypothesis. So not necessarily my area of interest or expertise. I think it's fascinating, but in my personal opinion, I think it's mostly government technology.
Cool.
Like
Yeah,
all the
fair
flying
enough.
saucers and stuff that we saw back in the 40s, that's all government technology that was being developed by the Nazis and our top secret space programs. They were testing all of that stuff, and they developed the narrative of, this UFO stuff to kind of cover up the fact that they had this technology. Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. So
Yeah.
let's get back. That's a whole other rabbit hole that could take us off.
And again,
of
I don't. So I just, in terms of my research,
yeah.
it speaks to me as a very human technology. There's nothing about anything that we've talked about thus far that is like extraterrestrial. There's nothing coming from space. It's all coming from Earth. And this is human Neolithic mindset technology. Same thing with the Egyptian pyramids. None of that to me speaks of aliens. It's all made of Earth materials, and it's all based on Earth science, Earth natural resources, Earth power supply. It's all human technology. So I don't agree with that narrative when it comes to the function of technological structures on the planet. Do I think there's some weird stuff going on? And, some of the unidentified things. So there's a great quote. Arthur C. Clarke, any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. So I remember the first time I saw a BlackBerry, and I've told this story before. My Uncle Rick, my family was pretty poor growing up, and we didn't have stuff like this. But we went to go visit my wealthier aunt and uncle. My Uncle Rick had a BlackBerry, and he pulled this thing out. And I remember so vividly in my mind seeing this thing as a child as like a rotating hologram device, because my mind couldn't conceive of the technological explanation of what he was telling me the capacity of the device was. It's just a BlackBerry. He was like, it has internet and storage and all this stuff. And my mind was so blown that I could not even conceive of the physical device itself. And I have this distinct memory of seeing it as like this weird rotating it might as well have been alien technology, because it was so indistinguishable from magic, because I had no conception of the actual technology. Same thing when it comes to UFOs. If you see something that kind of looks like a flying saucer, kind of looks like a flying device, it's our technology. If we saw something that was a legitimate alien craft or interdimensional craft of some sort, it wouldn't look anything like a flying device. Our mind wouldn't even be able to conceive of what it was, which goes back to stories in the Bible of like Ezekiel's wheel, when he's trying to describe this thing with rotating wings of fires and eyes and wings. He can't even conceptualize of what it is. So his mind is creating this abstract interpretation of what it is, because he cannot physically realize the complexity of the technology. So I think if you really saw a true alien or interdimensional craft, it would not look anything like what we understand as a flying craft, because the technology would be so advanced that our mind could not distinguish it from a magical phenomenon.
Okay.
I think that's a perfect example of what I'm trying to communicate when it comes to extraterrestrial or interdimensional technology. And that's a perfect example of the Ezekiel's wheel. His mind was so blown that it doesn't even look like a physical object. It's moving and it's changing shape those are the things that really get my interest, is stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Almost
well,
like a
good.
transcendental object.
Right.
Yeah.